The scolding was long. Everyone who'd healed him had their piece to say, but the walk home was worse. At least among everyone else, he could enjoy the more positive reactions a bit among the more expected words about valuing his safety more, and not putting himself at risk, but going back through the empty streets of Stonewall was just himself and Thera, with his girlfriend's silence feeling far louder than anything else and only made worse for his new mental structure, able to perceive a depth to the time that he never would have before.
Thera.
No. Okay. But Dash. Nope. I'm not in the mood. I don't want to hear it. All right. Considering that he'd almost killed himself in front of her, he understood why she was so mad, but he didn't know how to make it better other than giving her some space and delivering his most heartfelt apology in the morning, leaving him quiet until they'd made it home and putting out an offer so he could do exactly that. You want me sleeping on the couch tonight? Try it and you'll get to see just how much more unbelievably pissed I can get. Got it. Wow, I am doing shockingly bad at this right now. With no other options presenting themselves, he followed her to their room, laying down beside her while she turned away from him, with the only feeling coming being one of barely contained mana threatening to leak out as they both laid in silence. Time passing by but neither getting any sleep as it went, leaving him to try just once more to smooth things out. I'm sorry. When she didn't immediately respond, he assumed he was being ignored, left to wonder just what to do from there before she finally spoke up, sounding tired and hurt. It doesn't matter. I can't even tell you to not do it again because I know you absolutely will if you think you have to. You just put yourself in danger and don't think about if that's going to affect the people who love you. Thera, can you think about how I felt, having what was the first really nice, peaceful time with friends and family in ages only to feel your body twist and jerk as it started tearing itself apart? And yeah, in the past I've let it slide because I can see when you genuinely haven't had a choice, but you knew something was going to happen and you couldn't even bother to warn me, and you're just going to keep doing the shit so you can try to get stronger so you can go off and get yourself killed, and it doesn't matter. Unfortunately for me, I care about you, so I'm just going to have to put up with every way you might go and kill yourself, and I don't know why I'm even bothering because you're not going to stop, but just go up and bother your god. Ben. I'll be less mad in the morning. He didn't though, hearing what he'd put her through without considering how it would affect her. He rolled over and took her in his arms, speaking gently as he did. You're right. I'm going to keep doing things that might be dangerous, If this is you trying to make up, then you're about to get your arm broken. But I am sorry about the way I did it, he went on. I can't just stop trying to grow, but I should have given you some sort of warning about what I was going to do, even if I needed to be light on the details. I promise, if I ever think I ever need to do anything dangerous like that again, I will make sure I tell you, so it won't be a surprise and I'll find a way to make it as safe as I can. Yeah, you're the worst, she sighed as she rolled over, finally facing him. Genuinely, the reassurance you should have been giving would be telling me you won't do anything as insane as that again. You do understand that, right? Yeah, but I'm not going to lie to you. But maybe that's worth something and you could find it in your heart to forgive me. PFFF, we can work on forgiveness in the morning. I'm still too angry to sleep, so you're spending the next few hours trying to make it up to me. Yeah, I'll do my best. That's interesting, Ben muttered as he reached his god's realm in the early hours of the morning, getting the three already there to jump as they rushed to his side. The genuine version of this novel can be found on another site. Support the author by reading it there. Ben, what the hell happened down there? Myriad asked him. I mean, I know what happened down there. You blocked us somehow, but Oh, so that really did keep everyone from seeing, huh? Neat. That means I almost have privacy again, minus the gray and all. We couldn't see or contact you since I couldn't even find you despite knowing exactly where you should have been. What happened when you went back down there? I didn't miss much. I had to deal with the consequences of my awakening and was just a victim, so I didn't have a chance to really test any of my new skills beyond the obvious ones. However, coming here has shown me something new. Do I want to know? I no longer need to be asleep to come up here, he said, his body in the mortal realm still awake. You know what that means. Ben, new official rule for the faith. You are not allowed to spend every hour of the day in my realm. Come on man, why not? Don't you love me? Don't you enjoy every second we spend together? Don't you want your apostle, who has the most powerful mind on the planet I might add, to thrive by being able to live in two realms at once? None of those nearly as much as I love occasionally having some peace. Come up if it's an emergency, but otherwise, keep it to nights like we currently do. We have a good thing going here for my mental health. Ugh, boo, but fine. In that case, I guess I'll test something else while I'm up here. If it's related to your sacrilege, make sure you properly discuss it first. It's not so that means surprises are fine, right?
Ben.
Too late. They saw both what he was trying as well as his success as another Ben appeared in the realm, followed by another and continuing on from there, stopping at 20 and all of them speaking in one voice. Ha, neat. Since I can maintain myself in the lower realm, I can just keep sending more up. Wonder how I can make this come in handy. A question that made the rest of them wonder just how much of a headache all of his new power would prove to be once he had fully familiarized himself with it, leading Hellori to ask one of her own. So is 20 instances of yourself your upper limit then? She asked as she looked at them all, feeling a nightmare scenario where he'd want to spend time in that many realms form in her thoughts while he shook his heads. No, I can already tell I can do way more than this. I just figured I'd stop before it got too crowded up here. You know? This much hasn't actually strained me at all, so unless there's going to be a sudden hard limit for some reason, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to do at least a few hundred more. New rule, Myriad told him again. Unless there's a genuine reason for it and you discuss it with me first, no existing multiple times at once in my realm. I really don't need the headache. Okay, a little rude, he said as he forced the other 19 to disappear, trying to keep me from reaching my full potential, but I'll let it slide for now. There's a few other things to talk about now that everything's calmed down a bit. Such as? 2 things. First, what sorts of privileges can I get now that I'm a 3rd tier? I've already been told there's some. I want to know what I can get. Alright, a reasonable thing to want to learn, I suppose, but bear in mind, anything you gain can be taken away should you abuse it. Me? Abuse the power I'm given? Never. So what is it? Why must my future be so full of headaches? Myriad wondered, tilting up to face the sky for a moment to collect himself before going on. But as for what might matter most to you? Authority. Technically, you can be sent money for it, but you don't need any, so that won't be supported. Especially since, as a member of my church, I'm the one who'd be covering most of the costs dash. And most of the money for your church comes from me anyway. No need to drive that point home, I know. Anyway, you could also become a priority for supplies if there was anything you were looking to acquire, but seeing just how much you can materialize, that doesn't seem exceptionally pressing for you either. No, what matters is, so long as you have a good reason for it, you have almost immediate authority should you ever need to use it. If there's an emergency, you can go to any adventure guild leader and mobilize their entire guild immediately, and in many cases you could do the same with town guards or templars or even armies, though that last one would obviously be significantly more complicated, especially given the current state of things in the world. Still, if you wanted, you could demand meetings with world leaders and put them in positions where they'd need to make time for you, and while not obligated, I'm comfortable saying that if you were to reveal your status as a 3rd tier, you could get plenty of people to follow your will as well. Even just civilians going about their day. You're officially going to be a god, Ben. I can't stress just how much that means. All interesting, and he supposed it could be useful, but it was nothing he immediately cared about either. There were a few resources that he would appreciate having an easier time getting his hands on, and authority could matter in the right situations, but it was nothing he wanted to use it for in that instance. He was after opportunities to grow his skills and raise his power. He didn't want to waste time acting like the kid with the biggest stick on the playground. But it sounds like I could use it to get out of trouble if I really need to, so it's worth remembering. Okay, cool. If it ever comes up, then I'll look forward to seeing just how far the authority of a 3rd tier can go. Now for the second thing. Before, you told me that gods can do things with their souls and that you'd tell me once I became a god myself. Well, here I am, filled with curiosity and having not even remotely forgotten that promise, so let's hear it. A few looks went up among them, but eventually Nair shrugged and shook his head. It's not like he won't learn eventually, and there's no real harm in knowing. Well, I suppose, Myriad relented before directing his attention to Ben. But don't try to misuse this information. Understood? Crystal clear. So what can you use them for? Among other things, the biggest thing a god can do with theirs is bless the mortals who worship them. You give blessings with your soul? Among other things, Myriad admitted. They go towards giving skills too, as well as placing covenants, and, in our histories when we'd have the power for such things, some of us would place more powerful restrictions, curses on mortals we'd want to teach a lesson rather than sending them to the hells. In essence, it's used to strengthen or restrict another. Interesting, Ben muttered, already reaching out to his god before him with hand and soul, his intentions clear. Let me see. So you've already gotten uncomfortably open about wanting even more access to our minds, Hellori muttered while Ben shrugged. It's literally the most convenient way of gaining information. Besides, it's for Myriad, why would he mind? Connect was derived from his god's people's way of linking their subbrains for information. He was literally using it for its intended purpose with the being who was most suited for such a thing in all of existence, with the cube in question mostly fine with it. As long as you aren't looking for unrestricted access to my thoughts, then it's all right. So I assume you want to access my memories of how I'd give my blessings, skills, and covenants. And curses too now that you've told me about them, pretty please. Well, unfortunately for you, I'm wholly benevolent. I've never bothered cursing a mortal, at least not in any great way. Covenants are technically weak curses since they are a restriction, but you won't be getting anything like a curse of old from me. I do, however, understand how they're done, so I can pass that information along. Before he answered, Ben looked at the other two, both shaking their heads. I wasn't one to curse, Nair shrugged. It seemed pointless. And insufficient, Hellori added. If any mortal were bad enough to be cursed, it made more sense to either kill them or have them thrown to the hells. Why would I waste parts of my soul just to spite an unruly believer? All right, fine. Myriad, give me what you've got. With those words, he was instantly in his god's mind, seeing the thoughts the cube was putting to the front of it that held some of his more recent memories of blessing his believers, creating and giving them connect, and placing his covenants on the demi-demons, letting Ben understand the process of it as if he were the one who'd done it himself and leaving him to tilt his head as he processed all of the information he'd received. So you cut off pieces of your soul for all of that, he muttered as he mulled it all over. With blessings needing the biggest pieces and covenants the smallest. Interesting. There was more to it as well. The pieces needed to be shaped, both with faith and mana to build the correct structures in the second two entirely, but overall he'd describe what he'd been shown as straightforward. Certainly something that could be understood, even if it left a different question in mind. But then, Myriad, why aren't you the biggest god in the world right now? As flattering of a question as that is, I have no idea what led to it. Your soul is denser than any other gods I've seen, and that should be shocking to no one given your nature. You have so much of it, so you should be able to give so freely compared to any other god, and I feel like I've been seeing that fact considering you make sure every one of your believers gets a skill and blessing. Why aren't other gods coming to ask you to also bless some of their believers too? Sure, it would spread your name and maybe risk some converts once word got out that you're particularly generous, but it would also help this entire stupid planet, so why isn't that happening? Ah, I see. Well, unfortunately for me, it's mainly to do with the fact that until recently, I was basically in poverty. Yes, I have more to give, but considering the damage you've had to your own soul and what you've just seen in my memories, you should know that removing pieces isn't pleasant, and we use faith to heal the damage we sustain doing it quicker. It's only recently that I've had a reasonable amount of the stuff, and I don't want to spend it all on constantly repairing myself just to get my name a bit more out there. Maybe in a couple centuries, if I have a few tens of thousands of believers, then I'd be able to justify a bit more extravagance to get believers thanks to the investments I'm making right now, but as things stand, while I'm giving as generously as I can, I'm forced to let myself heal from the experience with time, which is all around a not ideal experience. Considering it's only been a few years since I'd gotten you, even with all of my new believers and my name known to the world, I haven't had the most time to build myself up. Anna. Love this novel? Read it on Royal Road to ensure the author gets credit. Didn't you get a lot of faith gambling on me when I was in Galwax's tower? Yeah, and you know what happens to most people when they win big? They spend it all and are stuck in poverty again almost immediately after, only with a couple extra doodads. You won't be watching me make the same mistake after so long. Okay, point taken I guess, but still all very interesting to know. So Yuzu and Elvit can both already do that. Huh. As far as mortals go, yes, although their souls aren't as equipped for it as a proper god's. Hence the partial blessings they give. Considering that they're forced to do it entirely through mana without being able to spend faith as well, it was never going to be convenient for them, but soul mages and gods genuinely do have an easier time with it because of their nature. Interesting. So, do you even feel the slightest bit of shame about constantly demanding blessings now? Hellori asked him from the side, getting a confused look for the question. Why would I? You've been asking us to rip apart our souls. And I've been asked to repeatedly damage my own, in case my 9 levels of soul expansion and 8 of soul resilience weren't being considered. Hell, now that I know this, I think I might actually be even less sympathetic. Before, I could just imagine it as some big, pain-in-the-ass thing. Now, though, it's something I basically put myself through daily. I'm asking for way more blessings the next time anyone tries anything on me. Very much not the takeaway we were hoping for, Myriad sighed. But fine, now you know, and it's something you can look forward to doing yourself once you're a proper god. Anything else? Well, there is one more thing to test, I guess. It was something that could only be tested up there in a god's realm, but rather than say anything he just did it, bringing his mental structure to the maximum of its potential as he began to walk around, seeing the realm and all within it frozen before him. It had been something he'd tested in the past and been caught for immediately. Up there, he wasn't limited by his flesh and attributes. He was in essence a mental construct, and the speeds he would move were limited by the ones he would think at. Speeds that, by all appearances, the gods could no longer keep up with. It was a discovery that made his sacrilege flare and brought a grin to his face for what it meant, even if he'd still need to be cautious. For all he knew, time gods would still be able to handle him, and perhaps even some others if they knew to expect such a thing of him, but as it stood, the bit of power he'd felt he had over the gods ever since his awakening could be properly exploited if he'd ever needed to. Taking the 1 or 2 he might have been able to handle in any hypothetical situation where they'd try to attack him to a number he couldn't guess at without any experience behind it. It was possible that the gods had other tricks they could use to defend themselves from a being like him, or just other abilities in general that could help, but as it stood, he'd be significantly more comfortable the next time anyone decided that his existence was a problem. So do I go and treat myself a bit? Lightly murder Ineth and Olencia, just to test out how things go? No, I don't need to awaken my sacrilege anymore. Not giving in to any of my more murdery impulses. At least not unless a few other things I'm going to test work out, in which case maybe. For now, though, there's one other pretty big implication of this. If he could now exist at speeds so fast that the gods couldn't perceive him, then that means the weakness of connect among them was gone. He didn't need to do it at speeds they could observe. He could do it as fast as he could think, which meant he could flash out his soul to read their minds and memories and have it retracted before anyone would ever know. A result that could have a million little uses, and he moved back to his original spot and connected to his god, letting the time pass as he measured how long it would be before he could feel the cube's mind notice, being left entire perceived hours to poke around before his presence was felt. "Ben, what did I just say?" Myriad said when he noticed, completely unaware of how long his mind was being read. "At least have a reason, and at least give me some warning. Is there some purpose to this?" "Not at all," he lied. "Just feeling the thrill of being able to do something like this now and wondering if maybe more exposure to the divine will be enough to help me awaken my connect too. Any chance you guys could snag me some more volunteers? MMH. After what just happened, I'm not sure if it would be a good idea if word got out that you were trying to get another awakening so soon, but I could probably tell a few I'm familiar with that you're trying to get some more experience with your new mind skill by connecting to other gods," Myriad said after a moment, with the other 2 having options as well. "If you don't mind having your brain picked, I know a few mind gods that might be interested in having a chat," Hellori told him, with Nair speaking up after. "And enough crafting gods have interest in you that I'll be able to get some takers. Everyone has their own work, of course, but if you'll be back tomorrow, we can get a decent flow in and out to give you at least a few minutes of their time." "That sounds perfect, thanks guys." A small, defeated part of himself didn't think it would be enough, but that was just the pessimism. There was no reason to assume that even exposure to one more god wouldn't be enough, and even if he was wrong, the 3rd tier was just a barrier to be crossed, same as the 2nd was. A far grander gulf to be sure, but something he could chip away at too, with the minds of the divine sure to take some mighty gouges for his ultimate goal. While part of himself stayed with his gods, the rest below focused on different tasks. Discovering that he could access two different levels of reality at once was a boon that he knew he'd be exploiting, even if Myriad was already trying to limit it. And with Thera asleep beside him and a few hours of the night still to go, he finally had some time to look at some of the changes in himself. With the simplest being to examine his card, taking it from the nightstand beside him to fully look it over for the first time since reaching the 3rd tier and glancing down at it for all of the changes it held. So my mana, stamina, and vitality have all grown enough that I'll have access to their king jobs. Sweet, I knew I'd be getting them for the first 2 with how much they were going to grow from 2 awakenings, but it looks like Yuzu's help made sure I wasn't just under that threshold for the last one. Looks like she was able to make sure my growth bonuses were 5% higher than what they should have been, even with my resistances weakening her spells, but some of the math here isn't matang. My intelligence is way too high. It was to a point that there was a chance he'd unlock an embodiment job for it the same way Thera had for her mana, with him holding over 150,000 points to it, forcing him to work through the math of how that value must have changed before arriving at an answer. Awakening to Eldritch Mind didn't double the value, it tripled it. Interesting, I remember when Myriad first taught me about awakening bonuses, he mentioned that some skills could technically raise them higher, but I've never gotten to see that since none of my first ones did that, and I've reached a point that my 2nd tier bonuses are too low for me to notice, even if that might have happened for anything else I've awakened. Of course, there's no guarantee that this is awakening growth and not leveling growth either. It looked like every level of Unnatural Mind was giving me about 500 points to intelligence when I got it. Maybe at the 3rd tier, every level of it I get is going to give me another 30,000 points. The only way to see would be to raise it, so I doubt I'll be able to find out before the 3rd wave unless something crazy happens, but still worth remembering, even if I don't necessarily need it. But I really should check out the effects of all of this mental power. He stretched out his soul with the thought, through the wall to connect to a bird sleeping in the backyard, and woke it up as he began puppeting its body, mainly wanting to see through its eyes as he actualized a new building to sit in that space, a perfect house out there, and leaving no strain on his mind for the experience. Yep, actualization is absolutely beneficial for all of this new intelligence and probably from the new state of my mind too. When it comes to pairing it with my materialization, it doesn't seem to be reducing the mana cost more than it already has been, which is a bit of a shame, but that just means that particular feature has more to do with my skill level if I want further improvements on that front. Okay, what else should I test? When it came to the 2nd tier skills he'd awakened in the tower, he already knew that the bands of Morabugel and Deathstone he'd been using to train his mana and vitality had officially become useless to him thanks to both his divine defense enhancement as well as his perfect absorption resistance, but even as he thought it, answers came to him instantly, with both bands being pulled from his rings and enchantments placed down, strengthening their original powers to far greater heights as he calibrated both to suit his regeneration rates, left satisfied by the end, even for the new problem it brought. The goal's to awaken my connect and pray that it will take in my enchanting when it happens, but with the way things look, there's actually a very real chance I awaken my enchanting instead. He thought with a sigh as he examined his work, expertly woven with mana modifiers placed in ways he never would have been able to manage only a day before. Enchanting relies on both knowledge and technical skill, while connect only relies on the latter. The changes in me have already left me far too good at applying the things I know and figuring out what I don't. There was always the chance that enchanting itself would pull in connect if it was the one to awaken, but he didn't want to place his hopes on that fact when it felt just as likely that it would merge into his crafting instead. In an ideal world, the 3 skills would combine together given the way he used them, but that really was too much to hope for. He needed to be at least somewhat realistic, and if things just happened to go his way, then he'd celebrate after, as simple as that. With that done though, there was another aspect of his body he hadn't gotten around to testing yet that he needed to examine before he'd come across something that would push his limits, just how much divine defense enhancement would protect him. It was already impossible to separate some of what it could do from his absorption resistance and a few of his other skills that for whatever reason hadn't merged into it, but the limits of his body needed to be understood, and to do that he materialized a sharp iron pin, pressing it into his arm and feeling it bend against his flesh. An already positive result considering that it would have gone through before, even if it would have taken effort to make it happen, but that meant the tests needed to go on as he made new ones, gradually increasing their material strength as they bent or broke one by one until something was finally strong enough to pierce his skin without being damaged, leaving a grin to stretch out on his face. I didn't have to put all of my strength into it, but considering how sharp I made it, the fact that took a fair bit of effort before I saw any damage is a very good sign. I might actually be able to get away with not being murdered for the next few months. This tale has been pilfered from Royal Road. If found on Amazon, kindly file a report. He watched as the small wound closed before his eyes, a clear sign of how his integrated divine body had grown as well before moving on, with the night still young and tests still to run. The second-tier skill he'd gained for awakening Eldritch Mind wouldn't be tested till later. If he was going to attempt to figure out something named Mind Break of all things, then he needed to be sure he had the proper experimental materials for it. But as for what his sacrilege had gifted him, the grand-sounding skill that ended up only being first-tier despite his expectations based on its name, he left different parts of himself to try and figure it out. While he may have no longer measured his mental structure based on number of minds, that was more due to the meaninglessness of such a thing compared to the past. He could have as many or as few as he needed, his mental power itself being divided to different tasks rather than being a structural factor to who he was, and it was something he could control freely, left to contend with what those changes in particular meant for him. Even if he was still himself despite it all, he could no longer pretend that his thought structure was anything remotely human. Questions he had could immediately be given answers based on the information he held, leaving what had previously been grand problems feeling almost trivial. The fact that he'd been able to finally decipher the 2 grand spells was enough of an achievement to show that, and even the act of refining them was only going to take some time based on the fact that some things would need to be tested and confirmed before progress could be made. A job for his research center with entire books of projects already being written in his head. Really, he was sure there were going to be more strengths and quirks to how he now thought too, but on that front, he could only wait to find them. It seemed like only the part of his mind he put forth to interact with the world around would really experience time, giving the rest of himself years since he'd awakened it to think and explore the thing he now was. And then deep material sense and unending extraction enhancement are both clearly altering how I feel the makeup of the world around me, and Artisan's soul should be lowering my leveling thresholds, which is another reason to worry about accidentally awakening my enchanting or maybe even my crafting, because it would suck just as much it that took in my enchanting and left me still needing to raise connect, but considering how much it's reduced my mana cost for all of my magics, it's worth the trade-off, which mainly just leaves discovering all of the functions and limits of Evil God of Sacrilege. The fact that it meant he could actually get some privacy felt like a far grander blessing than he'd expected, but other than how it left him sure he could harm the gods around him, he hadn't actually yet had a chance to experiment with it. He couldn't exactly harm the gods he liked in the name of testing, but he couldn't just attack the ones he didn't either, meaning most progress on that front would be slightly delayed until he got around to using some ethical test subjects. Which Thera isn't gonna like either, but I'll actually need to tell her about it because I literally just promised, and oh my god, I'm gonna need to put literally everything I've got into breakfast tomorrow, and yeah, I'm going to have to ask her to do something for me, and I'm absolutely not going to escape her wrath for it. Ugh, the worst part is I'm totally going to deserve it too. With tilde beta. Okay, for now just focus on what you can test. In the past, he'd managed to both fill himself with his sacrilege and spread it out around him, and since he already knew he was capable of both, he tested to see what changes there might be to his skill in it, leaving both his body and the room around him feeling thick with his power in a way that lingered even after he stopped, needing a conscious effort to clear it out, unlike how it would simply disappear before he'd reached the 3rd tier. Both options he could easily imagine being useful against the gods if it were to come up, but it was something else that caught his attention more as he felt some of it cling to the bands on his arms, leaving him to try loading them with his power and feeling it hold. Almost like bestowal, but it does seem to slowly be dissipating, just like the other 2 ways I used it. He analyzed. Still, as far as I can tell, loading it doesn't cost me anything? Or at the very least, if it does, the price is so low that I can't even tell what attribute it might be pulling from. So any weapon I can get my hands on can officially become an anti-god weapon then. Huh? Interesting, or at least it would be if I had any actual combat skills. I'll have to experiment with using this with my magics, but I should at least be able to apply this to marksmanship. God-killing bullets, I'm sure something like that will come in handy. Besides that though, oh cool. Looks like I've got my answer. Switching to the part of himself that had been trying to discover exactly what realm access did. A discovery had been made in the form of a path. Not one to any god he knew or had seen before, but instead somewhere entirely new that, when traveled, brought a part of himself to a vast, empty space in a higher level of reality that he could feel in its entirety. The instant he arrived, he could instinctually tell it was his, a place carved out in a higher realm for his own use alone as he perceived what of it he could, diving deeper into what it meant. While he'd never noticed any distinct boundaries to the realms he'd set foot in before, he could tell his own was small compared to the rest of them, but that wasn't saying much. Half of a kilometer in all directions from him was his alone to control, and with nobody to tell him no there, he began filling it up, actualizing things he wanted visuals to work on and bringing in more instances of himself too, utilizing the vertical space by creating giant buildings as a small town of Bens slowly came together. One main question on his total mind despite all he found himself doing with the space. What exactly does it mean for a person who's still technically mortal to have their own realm? It was something he was sure would only cause more controversy, especially considering that it was a skill that could grow, but he tried not to let himself worry about it too much. Ultimately, it was a space to use, one that he could take advantage of constantly without having to worry about any of the gods getting tired of his presence. Meaning it was the perfect place to forge ideas and even train a few skills too, his actualization being the prime one. And if I can move as fast as I can think up here, then that one in particular is going to be getting a hell of a lot of practice done. Looks like I'm going to become a contender for another skill before I know it. As the night ended and the levels went off in his head, he was immediately aware of his realm expanding, and it left the part of him that was still up there to start redesigning the layout he had while his physical body got up to start the day. Making way first to the kitchen to prepare breakfast and feeling a change in how he'd even do that, with the growth to his mind letting him see what were normally common ingredients he'd use in vastly different ways, and decided to let himself push both his knowledge and skill, filling the room with dishes, bowls, and pans that all stirred themselves while creating a process that would appear more akin to alchemy than cooking in the way he'd do it. After all, what was an ingredient if not a material to be used and measured out, combined with others to get different effects? Sure, those effects would be limited to flavor, mouthfeel, and scent, but they were effects nonetheless, designed specifically to stimulate what taste receptors a person held and light up their brains from the experience of eating, an alchemy of satiation and happiness for any who'd partake. With the effort not going unnoticed. As the smells alone filled the house, he heard others start to stir, Thera and Sonia both being drawn out despite any longings they still had for their beds, with one looking like she was still trying to do her best to be mad despite the drool leaking from her lips. Morning, morning. Take your seats and I'll have this out in a second. MMH, smells divine, Sonia muttered, her eyes still closed as she rested her head against the table. How was your little party last night? Sorry I missed it, but you know how work can be. Oh, fine, Ben said offhand as he plated up, wanting to be sure it would be as visually pleasant as it would be tasty, and feeling Thera's eyes on his back as he said it. You are not seriously leaving things at that? Well, no, but I don't want her to be so shocked she can't taste the food. Not to exaggerate, but I think this is going to end up as the best thing I've ever made, he said, taking a bite from his own plate before nodding. Oh yeah. Definitely the best thing I've ever made, and it's not even close. What exactly happened? Sonia asked, perking up as she detected her niece's mood beside her and leaving Thera to groan. Ben thought it would be a good idea to try and kill himself while he was lying on my lap. And I am genuinely so very, very sorry, and it won't happen again. So maybe try this meal I just poured all of my love into and forgive me? He asked her with big, innocent eyes as he put out the plates, watching as her own narrowed at him before she had a taste and softened despite her will. The flavor of the food competing against what lingering anger she felt and, at least while she was eating it, winning in the end. Leaving Sonia to only look more concerned as she glanced between the two of them, looking like she was about to speak up before Ben stopped her. There's no rush, so have a few bites first. I can explain when you're done. I think you can at least explain while I eat, she sighed as she had her first taste, her tone instantly changing as her full attention was brought to the meal before her, leaving Ben the leeway to enjoy his own before he'd lose the chance once the other two finished, left deeply content from the experience his food had created, even if there was a question in one of their eyes. All right, Yes, that was incredible, Sonia admitted. Now, what did you manage to do to leave my sweet niece so unhappy with you? Ahem, well, I did almost die, he admitted. Though I wasn't intending to dash. Except for the part where you tricked a room full of healers into being on standby, Thera chimed in. Which actually adds to my point about not intending to die, but let's not focus on that too much. Okay, so Sonia, don't freak out. Why? Because as of last night, you're officially housing one of the world's third tiers. She didn't respond, instead being left with her mouth agape as she looked to her niece for confirmation and getting a nod before her eyes turned back to Ben. Getting to see his face be painted with a grin despite some of the opinions present. I'm being serious, but do me a favor and don't tell anyone. I don't really want to deal with the consequences of word getting out yet, although I'm sure some of it might be spreading already given the others who saw and the gods reacting. What? No, I mean, congratulations, but how? Sonia asked. And for what? If you spot this narrative on Amazon, know that it has been stolen. Report the violation. Okay. So again, don't freak out. You're giving me the feeling that's going to be hard. And you'd be right, Thera muttered, since he's just given the gods even more reason to hate him. They're just jerks, it's fine to ignore them. Anyway, as for how, I connected to Myriad to try and awaken Connect, but I failed. What I did instead was awaken my mind and my sacrilege. You're looking at the holder of 2 third-tier skills. Again, Sonia's eyes turned to Thera and again her niece nodded. The food she'd been given the only thing helping to sate her lingering anger. And it almost killed him, she still added. Bled everywhere from it and all over me too, I might add, and somehow doing it broke the majority of his bones. Why would that even happen? Because I sure didn't understand it when I was feeling them all crack on top of me. And I am so sorry about that and had zero expectations that connecting to a god would be anywhere near that bad for me, and I deeply appreciate you saving my life and I love you, he said, leaning in and again trying to look as sweet and innocent as possible while she sighed. And I love you too, and I'm less mad than yesterday. You'll just be hearing about this for a while. Okay, honestly fair. I deserve that. But what now then? Sonia asked. You're going to be a god. Do you have work you need to be doing because of this? Fox kept constantly busy still. I know there's a lot of expectations for the role currently. Not that I've been told, he shrugged. Frankly, I don't think the gods really want me doing anything. I'm sure my mind could be put to the war in some way, but a lot of them are too hung up on the whole evil god of sacrilege thing. So there's probably an attempt to keep me away from anything too important. Since we don't need to pick Mora up till tonight, I was going to focus on experimenting with and examining some of the changes Awakening brought to me. Wait, what was that about being an evil god? The system's naming sense, I wouldn't mind it. You really should though, Thera sighed, wondering just how much of whatever issues had come with Awakening that skill were due specifically to how it was named. Evil's subjective, but even then, how could I possibly qualify? I'm such a sweet little guy. That's not even your only evil skill. Okay, but is evil affinity even actually evil in and of itself? All it's gonna do is help me gain and level more evil skills, and how's anyone to judge which of any new ones I would get are going to qualify, excluding my sacrilege? I don't think you can just exclude your most blatantly evil skill. Calling it my most evil one doesn't seem fair when it doesn't even do anything to other mortals, only gods. As far as you know. Okay. Yeah, as far as I know. Hey Rit, is O'Gilt around by any chance? Ben asked as he arrived at Thera's family home. The first person he'd found in his search, with the satyr shaking his head. Off hunting. I don't know when he'll be back either. That's inconvenient. Trying to go somewhere without a gate. Young godling? He asked with a smile, Rit at least having no qualms about what he'd seen Ben put himself through for power given his own past attempts to reach the second tier, but getting a shake of the head for the question. No, I'm looking to do some experimenting and need some fresh demons to use. He just makes finding them easy. In that case, maybe Abris. He's off patrolling. I wouldn't expect him back for at least a few hours. I take it you just need someone to help you track them then. Powerful too, preferably. I'm hoping to have some brought to me while I run my tests. Why? Is there another great spirit around you have in mind? Ha, there's always a great spirit around nowadays. Come on, I'll take you to her. Her. Huh? When he'd left to take on the tower, more than a few of the great spirits Mora had helped create had still been figuring out how they wanted to face the world, whether they'd take on a mortal form to interact with the people or remain in a shape that came more naturally to them. Meaning Ben wasn't aware of how all of the spirits would present themselves, nor which ones chose to appear female. With the way their race as a whole had exploded, he was sure it was something they and the world would need plenty of time to adapt to anyway, but as he was led through different halls and brought to a new room, he was given his answer. Two beings were in there, only one of them a great spirit, with the air crackling lightly for her presence. Ben laying eyes on the world's great lighting spirit, the first time since she'd been created, and left just a bit of surprise for the shape she'd taken. A question wandering through his thoughts for the sight. I wonder if this is how Thera felt seeing Ogilt, Bloom, and Grace. The new spirit had taken her princess's shape, looking like Thera in form but with a body made of blue lightning, crackling against the air and in conversation with another he hadn't expected to find when he arrived, with one of his fellow prisoners by her side. Taya, Asher, sorry to interrupt, but Ben was looking for some help, Ritz said as he entered, with the great lightning spirit who seemed to have taken the name Taya looking at him curiously, while the one by her side, the only example of a non-affinitied mana-based species. Asher the Wraith nodded his way, remembering well the one who'd saved him. The princess's consort, Taya asked as she appraised him, while leaving Ben to wonder if all of the new great spirits only viewed him through the lens of his relationship to Thera. What do I owe the pleasure? Ah. Sorry to ask, but I was looking for some help. There's some things I need to test, and the only really ethical way to do it would be to experiment on some demons, but if you're busy dash. Nonsense, to help you is to help the princess, we can make the time, she said, making it clear that she'd be bringing Asher along with her as well as where that cooperation came from. Shall we go now? Yeah, if you don't mind then now would be perfect. So Asher, you been adjusting well to the world? Ben asked. And Taya, you adjusting to existing? I don't think existing requires much adjustment. The lightning spirit laughed while the Wraith tilted his head in thought. It's been unexpected, but the spirits have been helping me adjust, and the country has been kind to me. Compared to my life before, I have no complaints, Apostle. Considering his life before involved centuries of imprisonment, that was far from a glowing review, but he seemed positive enough at least. The intangible aspects of his nature and immortal lifespan giving him a better tolerance for what he'd been through compared to so many of the other prisoners who weren't even safe to unseal, with all of them still weighing heavily on his mind. He tried to help them the best he could by connecting to them, but he was no therapist and their trauma ran deep. In the end, he could only feel lucky that as many of the ones he'd brought back had managed to hang on to some level of sanity even despite the thousands of years they might have been held. It was one problem his new mental structure didn't help him immediately solve, even if that might have been as due to a lack of useful information as anything else, but it was still something that he needed to work on, even if that matter was regulated to a different part of himself, while the front of his thoughts tried to make conversation with the two unique beings as they made their way through the streets. And you're making friends then? He asked Asher, nodding to Taya and getting a confused look for the question. Maybe? I'll admit their nature still confuses me. Despite being made of the same stuff, socially I believe my people have more in common with the standard mortals of the world, or perhaps its fairies would be the best comparison. Endless but not so, shall we say, focused? Well, I guess that's fair. Unlike the standard spirits or elementals, wraiths, or at least the one he was interacting with, naturally took a far more human-like shape and, like both the fairies and great spirits, didn't seem so focused on the aspects of their element that made them up as others of their nature. It made them and Asher easier to talk with, but there was still the wall of eternity separating them from other mortals that set them apart from the others who made up the world. Despite the answer though, Taya laughed, slapping his back as she did. Ah, what are you talking about? We've been getting on for months now, haven't we? Just 'cause I'm not them doesn't change that. Hence my confusion. The Wraith shrugged, leaving Ben to look between the two before focusing back on Taya. One of the spirits that helped birth you has been getting along with Asher since he arrived? Ben guessed, leaving her to focus back on the one at her side. See, he gets it. All right, I still don't. I'm not sure about your people, Asher, but when spirits are born they inherit some of their... Well, I don't actually know how they'd describe them since they don't think of them as parents. Contributors? Either way, the new ones get some of their memories. Is that what happened? One of the spirits that made you had been talking to him. Two, she clarified. A light and an air. Them? Asher asked, beginning to understand what she meant. But I still see them? And now you see me too. Apostle, I'd like to retract my previous statement. This world is taking a bit longer to get used to than I'd like to admit. Ha, yeah, I can understand that. Still, if you're making friends, then you're making a place here. I'd like to think that counts for something. They stepped through the gate as he said it, only a few steps more taking him to the untamed lands where he finally hoped to get the chance to begin his tests. With only one small problem he hoped the Great Spirit would be able to solve. The gate was the world's portal to the heart of the untamed lands, and as such was heavily trafficked. While there were many gates to many points of it, adventurers and armies alike would pass through for their deeper expeditions to clear out any demons growing in them, and that meant the immediate vicinity was going to be safer than even most villages that found themselves far enough from a given city. If he wanted access to demons, they'd have to go deeper. The narrative has been taken without permission. Report any sightings. So, will you be able to find me any demons and bring them back here? Ben asked. Or are we going to have to go a lot deeper? He already knew that they both would have control over their bodies to fly out wherever they'd need to, and his level of power meant he'd be able to fly himself at high speeds as well too, but before it could come to that, Taya held up her hand to stop him. You just wait here. I'll be back in a flash. She vanished as she said it. The energy form she wore not even leaving a breeze as she shot away, leaving only a single question on Ben's mind that had nothing to do with the speeds she could reach or if the element she ruled over meant she'd be faster than some of the more physical spirits like Abris or Salanoth. Did she just make a pun? He really was going to need to try to familiarize himself with all of the new great spirits and their personalities at some point for both Thera and Mora's sakes, but that was one of many future problems. In less than a minute she was back, 2 demons in hand, their limbs crushed and leaving them both to scream as she dropped them at his feet. Sorry, I didn't ask how whole you needed them. Are these good, or should I go get some more? It doesn't matter how beaten they are as long as their heads are okay, but I will trouble you to get some more if you don't mind. I don't know how many I'm going to need to go through. The spirit nodded and left again, giving Ben room to begin his tests as he looked at the demons on the ground before him and connected to them, doing different things to different ones. The first getting the full force of his mind, feeling the demon's self be erased in the process and leaving blood to begin dripping out of its orifices only a moment later. The strain destroying its brain and killing it instantly, which was not only the expected result but also one he doubted he'd been looking for. He'd been able to kill things with the strength of his thoughts even before he'd awakened to Eldritch Mind, and while it hadn't always worked in the past, it was often enough that it would have been more shocking if his new state hadn't been enough to kill something like that. It also wasn't something he could view as a separate skill. Sure, he was breaking their minds like the skill said, but he was also destroying far more than that, and what he'd just done was nothing new. If that was the method through which he was meant to do it, then he should have gained that skill ages ago, meaning he had to turn his attention to the second for continued testing, interacting with its thought structure in a few different ways until it too broke, putting his experiments to a pause until he got more and leaving him to experiment on each successive demon. The small bit of instinct he could feel for the skill didn't tell him much. He knew it was one he needed to connect to use, but that wasn't much to go off of as the bodies built up around him, drawing a few eyes from the others passing through the gate as he worked that were largely ignored. His focus was being spent on the minds he'd touch, trying to apply his thoughts and mana in different ways until he finally found one that worked. In essence, it seemed the nature of the skill meant he could use his mind to destroy another's in a method that was only marginally gentler than exposing everything he was to a creature to kill them instantly. Though the demon he figured it out on was essentially gone, its entire history erased from the touch of Ben's thoughts. Its body wasn't dead, nor was its soul lost. He'd done only what the skill seemed to be for and broke the thing's mind, leaving only an empty husk behind, which isn't exactly useful, he admitted with it done. At least not if this is all it can do. If I wanted it dead, then there's a million better ways, and if I wanted a new body to work through, then condemning it would be just as good, if not better, since it would get rid of the thing's soul, which means if the skill is going to have any value, I'm going to have to see to what degree I can limit it. He could destroy a creature's mind, but did he have to destroy it in its totality? If not, then a world of options would open, some of which having the potential to solve at least one of the problems he was dealing with as the successive groups brought to him became the victims of those tests, seeing if he could break smaller segments and finding success after a few more attempts, working down the degree he was breaking each time into smaller and smaller segments as he destroyed specific memories and pieces of information from their minds, slowly deleting their lifetime of experiences until there was nothing left, only in a far more controlled way than the first time. The level confirmed it. He was using Mind Break, and he was mastering it quickly with all of the bonuses on him. With the skill, he'd already been able to develop enough to start seriously thinking about how he'd apply it, with only one last problem to deal with before he could. Ethics. Hey, Myriad, I need a favor. Tangentially, can you get me Nair if he's around? Consent. He was back at Polinia's residence by the time the god he wanted answered. Ben left sitting outside to stare at the buildings as he waited, only perking up to the sound of Nair's voice in his head. Alright, so this is kind of a tough ask, and if you don't want me to, then I won't, so just keep that in mind. Yeah, maybe. You know, I brought back one of your people with me when I came back from the demon world, right? The god asked him, sounding far more serious now that a believer of his who'd been left to go insane for thousands of years was being brought up and was at the crux of what Ben had wanted. He and so many others are being sealed away right now for their own safety as much as anyone else's, and I haven't been able to do anything to help them until now. I've tried talking to them, and I've tried strengthening their minds with my own, but nothing was able to fix the things they went through. Now though, I just spent the morning figuring out how my Mind Break works by testing it on demons, and I can destroy memories with it. The god finished, with Ben nodding in the world below. Basically, it's a bit more than that. I'll also be trying to strengthen their original memories too, kind of forcing them to mentally relive their lives if I can, and with Eldritch Mind it shouldn't be hard, but this is the best shot I've had so far to genuinely help them. Permission. These people, I can't just leave them like this, but compared to anything else I've tried, this feels like it will leave the biggest room for problems. I don't know what deleting thousands of years of experience from a mind will do to a person. Compared to the tests I was able to run on some demons, I have no clue if this is going to be safe for them, but the only way to know is to try. But it's not like any of them are going to have any surviving family to consult about how they'd feel about this. They only have you. So Nair, knowing there's going to be some risks behind it, may I please try to help one of your believers? I know, but I don't know who else to ask. You're one of the first gods on the world, right? That means your world was invaded early enough that if there are going to be some negative effects for this, they should present most strongly in the ones who'd been held the longest, and you're the god I'm close enough to be comfortable asking. If you're against it, then I won't. There's always a possibility that some other option will present itself if I have more time to work through it, or I can get Myriad to look for other gods who'd be willing. I wasn't asking to pass on the blame, Nair. I just want to do the right thing. Alright, I hope I'll be able to give you some good news. With the god's agreement, Ben let himself into the building he'd made. The walls lined with pods holding On's prisoners, each of them frozen in time. Still trapped, but hopefully in a kinder way, and Ben knew where each individual it held was kept. Their minds deeply explored for whatever glimmer of salvation there was to find, but until that day coming up empty. With the test he was about to run dictating whether the method he'd devised would hold any hope for giving them back some of what they'd lost as the shell holding his target came before him. The genuine version of this novel can be found on another site. Support the author by reading it there. His memories had already been explored. Ben knew well who he'd be looking at. A young man for his kind who'd been a hunter back on his lost world. Not one to participate in the crafting his god ruled over in any great way, but instead choose to focus on Nair's other aspect of challenge, wanting to push himself in the role he'd decided on in life that had left him with enough skill to survive past the time Nair had abandoned his planet, becoming a trophy for an invading god. But the memories of that life were nothing, a blip lost behind the countless years of containment that had come after, seemingly completely forgotten in a way that forced Ben's new mind to notice something that his old one never paid attention to. Few people held truly perfect memories, but when he'd looked there was an entire life to be seen. telling him that what he'd witness any time he used the skill in such a way wasn't memories recorded in their brains but the perfect information recorded in their souls, leaving him to wonder just how well what he was going to do could really work at all. Destroying a demon's mind had seemed to have erased its memories for both itself and Ben, meaning he was likely removing them from both vessels, but he didn't know what deeper implications such a thing held. Did the brain itself even have the capacity to remember the entire life it had forgotten, even with his help, or would that act of trying to erase all of those long centuries leave nothing left, destroying the very vessel that held them despite the intent he had? Countless thoughts ran through his head, but in the end he slapped his cheeks, forcing his mind to order. "This will work or it won't. All I can do is my best," he muttered to himself. "It's not like anyone else is working on a solution for these guys. If I don't do it, then they might just end up left here for either the countless years it would take my enchantments to decay or until some future generation wants this bit of space and gets rid of them in one way or another. I can't just hope someone else figures this out. I have to try." The pep talk only increased the weight of responsibility he felt, but this wasn't something he could just put off for fear of failure. If he were to die, then they might never be saved. It was yet another time limit he felt weighing on him, that he wanted to get rid of them, and they're so delaying. No longer he reached out with his soul through the enchantments and thin sheet of metal before him to link himself to the one trapped on the other side, laying out the whole of their existence across his thoughts, and began carefully pruning away entire days the other didn't need. He wasn't going to get rid of all of his imprisonment, at least not at first. Should all else fail, then that would be the last, desperate attempt, but what Ben really wanted to do was trim it down, taking away any days that were obviously worse than the last so those memories couldn't haunt him, and sliming down the rest of them too. An entire century disappearing instantly for how plainly awful it had been, all while he forced the man to relive the life he'd lost, playing the beginning of his existence over and over again back at him to try and strengthen it with all of the skills he held. There was the question of if Ben should include Nair's world's invasion as he did it, the start of that deep trauma that seemed like it would be so much better forgotten, but the point of it all was to try and bring him to a state where he could come out to the world, and to do that he would need context. The understanding of what happened and why he was there, for fear that holes in truly important memories would only lead to a future breakdown that couldn't be fixed. Every choice he made had to be measured against distant consequences, but even then, another 1,000 years were shattered, all while a fragile stability began to take shape. Internal consistency was becoming more important with every swath he took, trying not to leave memories of the man thinking about breakdowns that now never happened. But on that front, there were few cases to really be concerned about. With each day unchanging, being left to look out on the swarm that had killed his people and his world, there was little enough in the way of variety for many true holes in his mind to be truly noticeable, even to the most discerning. If another memory reader showed up then as things were, they'd see a century of torment but nothing more, with even that feeling weaker than the memories of his time before, Ben having done as much as he'd been comfortable with, leaving only to see how his work had fared. Pulling the remade mind into his own, he constructed a space based off of one of the man's happier memories, just different enough that it wouldn't be suspicious in and of itself, while he created a mental construct for himself to act through, taking the shape of a more elderly worshipper of Nair in an open meadow and watching in his mind's eye as the man was left briefly dazed before jumping up to look around at the scene Ben had created, panting out as he did and speaking in what had been his original tongue, the world speak bound to him, still unnatural on his lips. Is this real? You're free," Ben told him, cutting to what the other really wanted to know, rather than break the news that what he was seeing was very much an illusion. "A lot has changed. There's plenty you'll need to adjust to, but I promise, those walls won't hold you again." Falling to his knees, tears rolled down the other's face as Ben walked to his side, wrapping him in his arms, creating the feeling through the connection that bound them for what felt like the man's first bit of touch in a century, giving all of the comfort he could. By the end, Ben was resting his head against the pod that held the man he'd just done his best to save, conflict running deep in his, as he did while Nair spoke up at the display. "I succeeded." Ben cut him off. "Mostly I succeeded. It's not to the point I would have liked, but, well, as things stand, I don't know if I can do any better." He took a deep breath, trying to suppress his bits of disappointment to himself no matter how it had felt. He'd been exposed to the other's mind and he knew the quality of his work. Even as he held him for what warmth and comfort he could give, The truth was inescapable. I can save them. This is proof I can save all of them, but I can't let them out yet, he explained, pinching his brow as he did. Unless I start snipping away even more, which I really don't think would be a good idea. I'm pretty sure if he comes out and finds out that this world is currently being invaded, then he's going to have a genuine breakdown that he might not be able to recover from. I wouldn't be surprised if he decided to stop living then and there, and while I won't know how the others will react until I do them, I'd expect much of the same, especially considering how many of them are going to be the last of their kind. He's better, and now I'm confident that I can help everyone else too. But I can't actually release them unless we win the war. Otherwise, everything I've just done will be for nothing. Ha! I've always had high standards for myself as a mortal. You won't find godhood to have changed that in me. I'm significantly less for one of those options than the other. Yeah, maybe I should be getting the permission of the other gods of the world like I did you, but honestly, I think that gave me a good feel for it. Doing the rest will be quick. With Connect at its 9th level, he was now able to access roughly 10 meters of space in all directions, and all of the prisoners had been efficiently packed. He could link his mind to dozens at once from where he stood, and that very mind was equipped to go through all of them at once, examining each of their memories from thousands of different angles at speeds that could beat the gods. He could act with unnatural levels of care, and it would still be quick as he walked through the building, each step healing and comforting a new mind. He didn't release any when he was finished, too sure that the fragile stability he'd helped build would come crashing down in the face of how much they'd need to learn in that new world, and the dangers it held, but it still weighed on him as he left, off to focus on some of his other work for the day. He stopped by his research institute and left entire books of tests he wanted run and produced more soul tiles when he got back to the shop, with adding them to the rest of the church in Stonewall being only a small priority, but one that would make his God happy for all of the new souls who would give him faith, with getting the other churches of Myriad covered on the list of chores as well. Actually placing them would be for another day, though, as he next went through one of his newer gates, having different souls that needed to be placed as he went back to his factory, finding it to be a hub of activity compared to the last time he'd been through. The workers who were managing it finally arrived, with his presence not going unnoticed. When he'd activated the gate and stepped through, a few eyes turned to him and some whispers went up, with one of them walking over. "Mr. Ben?" she asked, an older member of Nair's race who eyed him up and down. "I am. Don't mind me. I'm just here to finish a few of the different bands that were made and to, well, I'll finish those first for now. Mind showing me where they're piling up?" "Of course, right this way," she told him, leading him over to piles of crates that had been left there, filling the space and waiting for him to complete them so they could finally be shipped off. "Ugh. I guess I should be trying to come here once a week to get this done so it doesn't pile up so much. I guess I can be doing that before or after I train Delaire occasionally." "Want these cracked then?" she asked him. "I can go grab a crowbar." "Don't bother, I can finish them from here." His material sense was telling him exactly where the rainbow mana crystals were in each case, and the souls he'd materialized didn't need to be by his side, so with all of his new mana, he added the final component they'd need, ensuring anyone who'd wear then would be empowered for it, to a point that the ones I'd already been distributing are seriously obsolete. Maybe I should get the gods to try and institute a trade-in program when they distribute all of these new ones. I could replace the old souls with what I can do now, but no. If anyone important enough to need a better model gets it, then the old can just be distributed to anyone who's a lower priority. Since the bands themselves are being materialized, it's not like there's a limit on materials. This content has been unlawfully taken from Royal Road. Report any instances of this story if found elsewhere. "Done," he said after a moment, feeling his soul refill for the mana he'd spent, and seeing that, to the woman's credit, she wasn't questioning if he'd really done anything. He hadn't bothered probing her mind, so he didn't know what she'd been told about him, but whatever it had been was enough for her to take his word. "I'll try to be back once a week so these don't build up too much, but for now I'm going to use a bit of the extra space. You mind if I move things around a bit? Be my guest. Is there any way I may assist?" "No, don't worry about it. I'll be quick." More mana spent left different boxes and tables to be shuffled around the space, creating more room in the already large building. When Ben had first been given the place to build and design some enchanting factories, His first step had been to use all he'd already known to improve the design, but his understanding of enchantments and how to use them had grown exponentially, allowing him to pull a far greater achievements and making ideas he'd left before suddenly far more possible as materials were pulled from his rings and reshaped before the eyes of the surprised workers. Enchantments placed and only needing the items those new factories would place their magics on as Ben spoke to the heavens above. "Hey Myriad, I made something. Okay, a bigger something than usual then. 2 new factories, one to produce gate enchantments and one to produce mini-gates. You guys up there are just going to need to get some other groups to build the structures themselves to be enchanted on. It wasn't exactly hard. With this new tool though, just do me a favor and make sure I'm paid well for it. So genuinely hurtful that you're all willing to be openly and blatantly racist against me. Not better and Myriad, what should I be doing with my riches at this point? Should I buy a medium-sized country just because I can? What would the money I'd get for this actually do for me? Sure, but I'm long past that point. I keep making new sources of income, plenty of which are going to keep paying out for years to come." Myriad said, the hint obvious but ignored as Ben thought it over. "Yeah, okay, I guess you're right. I'm a god now, which means I should be trying to think about wealth beyond my mortal lifespan. If I'm going to need a church of my own one day, I suppose I should secure permanent funding for it. Tell the others up there that I'll be taking standard payment for gate construction for each regular one they decide to make and half of that for each mini one, in perpetuity. I mean, yeah, kind of. Now that I've reached godhood, I'm actually going to need to rewrite my will. A large chunk of my fortune is going to need to be reserved to building my churches and getting me believers. I mean, I guess I could build myself a few churches before I die, just to get the ball rolling, but with the sort of funds I've got I could support plenty of workshops as a generous patron so long as they choose to worship me for their first couple years of setup. And that is genuinely so hurtful to hear no matter how true it is, but fine. This world has researchers and scientists. I could help fund their experiments in exchange for faith. Hell, I could even help them work through different problems too. So long as I keep up to date on different bits of study after I ascend, I'm sure I could do a great job of it. I have no clue what you're talking about. Still, never too soon to start preparing for my own godhood. I should start making my own soul tiles to worship me. Even if I won't be able to use it yet, it would be nice to have it ready for when I need it. And I'll still keep making yours too, don't worry," he thought with a laugh. "And I guess it's not going to be a huge priority. It's not like ascending will make the skills I currently hold disappear. I can always come down to the world after I die to make myself soul tiles too. Although, how I make souls seems dependent on the condition of my own. I wonder how ascending might change things for me?" Myriad said in the end, having an easy enough time imagining that. Third tiers almost always gained believers for their achievements in life, if the gods they worshipped didn't just outright encourage a few of their believers to convert to them. From that perspective, Myriad was left with the horrifying thought that Ben's death might get him more believers when he ascended than Myriad himself had, but Ben's mind went to a different place, with how the powers he held in life would affect what he'd get next. Okay, well, 2 things. First, I'm a contender for hive mind, so who's to say I'll be restricted in the same way as other gods when I can already use the bodies of anyone who enters my range? And second, Ben went on, leaving Myriad to grapple with all of the implications of what he'd just dropped. You can descend onto believers or avatars, but who says we can't split the difference? I have all of these perfect, nearly perfect clones of myself lying around down here, and it would be a waste to just throw them out. Is there any reason to assume I couldn't temporarily inhabit them in the same way? Doing such a thing would likely leave him vulnerable to true death, the same any god risked when they came down to the world, but there'd be numerous benefits too. He'd have a body perfectly adapted to him in the event that hive mind would work like he'd hoped, and he'd have multiple of them to access at once. If he could already ascend to a higher realm multiple times over, then could he descend in the same way? If that were the case, then it seemed likely killing even one Ben wouldn't be enough to get rid of him, and more importantly, it meant he'd be able to keep causing chaos in the mortal realm long after his death. What can I say? Godhood seems like a decent deal, but I don't want to have to go through the limits you guys seem to have for it. Better to start figuring out how to handle them now. Once work was done at his factory, he returned to the shop, making use of his warehouse and all of the clones he kept within as they started to move and make, leaving his true body to sit at the heart of it all and think. Every second of the day, he could feel a million different ideas forming in his head as different bits of knowledge were put together in a puzzle with no final form. There was so much to do and test, and he needed to start somewhere, with part of that focus being directed first to a different bit of growth. All of the parts of himself in his realm were actualizing up there, but there was no reason not to do the same down below as well, and he let different constructs flash in and out of existence as fast as he could think, creating what would look like a shifting blob to anyone with a standard thought speed as animals and structures and abstract shapes flashed in and out of existence, the goal he was feeling there clear. As of a bit earlier that day, he'd become a contender for his esoteric actualization, and that was something he could try to push beyond its limits. As far as he could see, it had no risk of merging into his connect or his enchanting if it somehow reached the third tier, and it was something he could do on the side as he focused on his real work, but at a volume that would destroy its barrier to the third tier. It was a skill dependent on his mind, and with the new shape of it, experience for it would come in almost endlessly, meaning acquiring the growth bonuses for it would be easily possible. Which means I should consider taking the Master Actualizer job for my next run, he told himself, although I should have more than a few other new ones too, possibly some I can't currently guess at. Really hope they get back to me about the setup soon. While he did that though, there were other tasks to work through and experiments to run, with Ben making something unlike anything else he'd created in the world until that point. A toy car, left to spin around the floor as it went, but what separated it from anything else that world held wasn't the design but the power source. Using the information he'd acquired since coming to the world, what he'd built wasn't a toy to be run with mana but instead chemistry, the reaction taking place with its batteries producing electricity, for a result that was instantly worse than any of the base magic materials in the world. Sure, it ran just as fine as it would have if he'd constructed it with mithril and enchantments, but that was only for then. Unlike magic materials which seemed to absorb and potentially even generate their own mana, a chemical reaction would run out, leaving them to die in the end and creating waste for that fact. About as severe of a drawback as something could have in that world, but not an overwhelming one. The vast majority of enchantments weren't powered by a piece of mithril or mana crystal after all, but by the user's own store, filling whatever tool it was to power until it would run out and then needing to be topped up again. Even with all that Abris seemed to endlessly produce, they were still rare enough for any common folk that left price as a prohibitive entry point. He himself could increase the overall flood farther with his materializers, but a proper battery factory would be able to help plenty for so many items a person might not want to waste their mana on if they didn't have to. And it wasn't like they'd have to necessarily become waste either. He was sure he could build a tool that would be able to break a chemical product into its base reactants again, which could be a place where it would make sense for mithril to be used. Either a household having that one mithril tool to in essence recharge their spent batteries, or instead let them take them in to a central hub to be recharged, eliminating the need for them to turn to waste. But batteries weren't the only option. As much as he enjoyed using Rainbow Mana Crystal, considering the amount of power it held, he couldn't deny how much of it was wasted on individual items. But what about, instead of that, any town or city were to have a central repository of it where the mana would flow to each home to be accessed through something akin to the electrical plugs of Earth, charging items with power for when they'd be needed and allowing them to be plugged in again when they weren't. Such a thing would be just as sustainable, even if it would be a bit more work to remodel any buildings that were already around to take advantage of it. But then, how much do any of these ideas even matter? He asked himself as he laid back, materializing a thin cylinder of white mana crystal as he did. This is basically one of the first things I solved coming to the world. It just needs to be applied. Even if it would be expensive, everyone could have 1 or 2 mana batteries to insert into enchanted items if they'd only be made to hold them, and then if one was in use, they could just use their own internal supply like they currently do for power. Building the crystal into an item has always been wasteful, but, well, I can worry about trying to change the way the planet sees magic materials in the future. For now, other things to try. Attempting to create a functional battery had been more of an application of his understanding of the world's chemistry than anything else, using concepts he'd been taught and extrapolating from there to see if it was actually possible as a way of verifying his understanding and the rules of it he'd learned, with a different test coming next. Materializing again, this time 3 items were made, one being both a receiver and a transmitter, while the other 2 sat in his hands filling similar roles with different desired outcomes. Two things he'd never thought he'd hold again as he looked at the two simple phones he'd created. And now for if it works, he muttered as he pressed a button on one, getting no reaction from the other to tell him the call was being sent or received, and left him to hang his head back. Well, based on everything I know about the universe and how it functions, that should have worked, which means there's either some part of physics I've got wrong or incomplete. Lame. I'll need to think of a few more tests to have run then. Even if that hadn't worked, he was sure he could have successfully created something like a landline, but given not only the invading demons but also the native life on the world, he doubted that such a thing would hold up for even a few days before something came to destroy it. He was sure he could make it possible on a small scale, having phone systems set up within any town or city, but using them for worldwide communication would be a far bigger challenge. And if I wanted them to be functional for both terrestrial and aquatic races, then that's going to be even harder. Ugh, subterranean too, I guess. Why does it feel like I need to skip a couple major technological steps to make this work to the degree I want it? This really seems like it should be easier. It seems so, but this universe appears to have some annoying and hard-to-observe hurdles that are getting in the way of certain points of progress. A voice beside him said to his rhetorical question, Quillith making an appearance that forced Ben to sit up. If you stumble upon this tale on Amazon, it's taken without the author's consent. Report it. Oh, hey. I wasn't expecting to see you today. Considering your rise to godhood, it was easy to decide that a proper congratulations needed to be made. The alien said with a thin smile, dwarfed by the grin on Ben's face. You all heard about that, yeah? You have earned yourself more than a few fans on my world. The instant you started bleeding and your bones were breaking without rhyme or reason, a large number of eyes started watching to see just what you'd done. I had faith, of course, but double godhood was more than even I'd expected. And I'm going to let the fact that I'm being so heavily watched slide for now, since I've at least gotten some privacy from the gods. Yeah, sacrilege and my mind have both grown, but is that really what you're here for? I suppose a part of it is out of curiosity about the scale of the change you've gone through, though with neither being particularly visual skills, it seems like it will be hard to judge. Not quite. This has led to one pretty significant change in me that I'm working to verify I'm right about. I've decoded the summoning spell in its entirety. The gray blinked at him. Come again. I need to verify at least some of it through testing, and I'm having my people run some experiments to see if they arrive at the results I've predicted, but so long as they do, I'll instantly be able to cut away some pretty large swaths of the spell we wouldn't need, he said with a shrug. From there, it's just improvements, which is going to be harder, but I'm already working my way through. For the longest time, I'd thought the summoning spell was a masterpiece, and I suppose it still is, but it's not perfect. By taking some of the components and applying them to items, then we'll be able to cut some of the load on faith that the gods would have had to deal with, and then I can apply the enchanting modifier to strengthen it in a way that its original creators hadn't seemed to have discovered. Then, while I can start trying to figure out better configurations of modifiers to improve the base design, I'm also thinking about how I might go about discovering new modifiers that are either lost since I only have the two spells to steal them from, or else might not have been discovered by its makers in the first place, which, well, let me say that's what I'm doing, so I can feel a little smug, but for now I'll show you my work. A thick wall of papers covered in notes appeared, floating at his back for the gray to see and record, with as much information as possible provided through words and diagrams to make up for the fact that they couldn't view the mana structure itself as they observed that reality, leaving Quillith at a loss for words as Ben went on. As things stand, this isn't enough for the gods of this world to save all of you in your totality, but I'm sure that if in the next few weeks and months we'll see some pretty massive improvements, but honestly, even with just this, I think you'll be able to make it work if you wanted to go to a different god in the universe, if you'd found any you think are worth approaching yet, and they'd be able to take a healthy chunk of your race. Hell, even if it would mean your people would be spread out across different planets across the universe, it's not like you couldn't do it a few times until you managed to save everyone, even if you would be separated for it, but still, I'd say this is good progress. Progress, Quillith said as he stared at all of the work being presented, his planet already getting to work analyzing it. Ben, this is hope. Yeah, well, if you guys do end up landing on this planet, make sure you remember this when you're picking out gods to worship, he laughed. Ideally, I'll see out my full lifespan, so I don't know how many of you would still be left by that point after being brought over, but still, maybe make sure any children and grandchildren born here remember to give the great god Ben the occasional prayer. Never too early to start gathering believers, as I understand it. You don't have to worry about that, he told him, far more seriously than Ben expected. I meant it when I'd said you have fans. Your efforts are no secret to my kind, Ben. And no matter how you're viewed on this planet, on mine you're a hero. Gosh, you're going to make me blush. I'm being serious. The efforts you've been putting forth to us haven't been going unnoticed, and with that attention, the work you've been putting to this world is being seen as well. If this world doesn't fall and my people are able to join it, you can expect faith from a good portion of them. Well, thanks, he said, a bit more seriously. That's kind of nice to hear compared to what I get from some of the gods of this world. Is there anything else I can do for you while you've stopped by then? Is there anything else I can do for you? Quillith asked back. You've worked your way through most of the information we've gathered from this universe, but I can provide you with all we've learned since our last meeting. Quillith, am I allowed to be a little greedy? Ben asked, all of the clones he was working through stopping their tasks to focus on the alien, getting a nod for the question. You say you've given us a way out. Even if it's not perfect, it's more than we'd had before. If it's in my power, then ask for as much as you want. I'll do my best to see it done. Okay, thanks. So here's the thing with the way my mind has changed. I only have so much information in my head to work through, and while it seems like the parts of my thoughts I assign to more basic problem solving and learning have become immune to boredom, I'm still noticing a, shall we say, suboptimal lack of stimulation, and the easiest way I can see to fix that is to learn more. I'm not sure how much I can assist with that, unfortunately, Quillith said with a frown, disappointed to get a request he might not be able to help. With what you've given us, I'm sure I can have more resources freed up to enhance our search of your reality, but even then, I doubt I'd be able to get more than you'd be able to take in a single evening of time. I know, but you actually have far more than that, don't you? Ben asked. You have the multiverse, information on all of the realities you've been observing since you first developed the power to do so, and all of the information within your reality as well, and to be honest, I want it all. Every piece of information and knowledge and story and myth and things I might not even be capable of understanding. I want to take it all in and see what's there. Is there something you're hoping to find? Maybe, he shrugged. I'm sure your own people have been looking into it some yourselves, but now that you've had the existence of souls confirmed, I'll admit to being interested in seeing if any places in the multiverse seem to have information on them that line up with my own observations, and then if they'd have more information that I don't have, but just as big of a part of it is knowledge for knowledge's sake. Maybe it will all be useless to me, but if I don't look, I'll never know. While I'm not sure how the speeds you observe the universe have changed with your awakening, I can tell you that the limiting factor is going to become the speeds we can transmit it to you, the Gray pointed out. And I can't express enough, our observational data is vast. The majority of it is run by algorithms that observe, collect, and categorize information while marking specific points of interest for my people to personally study in detail later, and we've been doing it for millennia. If it were all to be printed in books, the library it would make would cover your world a dozen times over at the very least. And I can dedicate myself to absorbing it still, Ben nodded. I'm not limited by my number of eyes, as you can see, and I can optimize that even further in the future. All I need is to know if you guys will do it. If that's what you're requesting, then we will. You'll get no argument. Fantastic, and in that case, no time like the present, he told him, Quillith expecting as much as screens filled the room, each flashing with information at the highest speeds they could, yet still left as a crawl before Ben's various eyes. It wasn't like he was getting information from the whole of the multiverse. He didn't even know how big it could even be if it wasn't just outright endless, but to be able to get some peeks into a million different realities could be nothing if not exciting, giving him new bits of stimulation to think on in the endless time that filled his head. Moving from town to town after such a span, working at the larger hospitals in bigger cities, nothing was more inescapable than just how under control everything was. In the past, whenever she went anywhere around Stonewall, things had felt frantic. The healers would be overworked and in short supply too, but the presence of the small gate network made in the heart of her town had changed that, along with the demi-demons going out to work through it. In each stop she'd made, she would find a handful of them interacting with the locals and fitting in surprisingly well, chatting and laughing and creating the exact sort of atmosphere that wasn't going to give her the sort of work she could use to distract herself. So I could go back to one of the hospitals, but No, I'm not giving this time up either. She'd been expecting she might be out late enough the day before that she'd told them she wouldn't be able to make it, and the day off wasn't something she'd be willing to give up. No matter how much going in for that heavier work would have done the job of keeping her mind and thoughts occupied instead of where she currently was, sitting on a bench with her head held back, trying to suppress everything going through her. Ben had reached godhood. At the same time it was leaving a pit forming in her stomach. It was threatening to make a smile break out on her face, and no matter how she'd felt about the way he'd done it, that wasn't the real problem, at least not then. No, the issue was what it felt like that fact meant. He hadn't raised the particular skill he'd wanted to, but as absurd as the idea of accidentally reaching the third tier for something felt, the problem was that he'd done it for not one, but two different skills. Something she hadn't even really turned her nose up as impossible for him despite how much it would have seemed so for anyone else. Only thinking it couldn't be done in the time they still had before the third wave, but now she'd been proven wrong. He'd shown it could be done, and now he had months left to try and get the second skill he believed he needed to go off and get himself killed. The danger he'd put himself through making the new bits of power he held feel negligible compared to how much safer he'd be if he'd only gotten the one and was forced to fight the war in a far more expected way. And yet, despite all of that, she was happy too, thrilled really, for one equally as meaningful reason. If he didn't die, either surviving his suicidal plan or else just not managing to go through with it, then he'd just gained entire decades more that she'd be able to have him for. Awakening's affected lifespan, with Ben having had enough second-tier ones to have in essence already doubled what he had remaining and now more than tripled for how third-tier ones would affect it, and from what he'd told her of what his people could generally expect. That meant he could have anywhere from 150 to 300 years left to spend with her, lengthened for whatever affects her efforts to increase his lifespan with her magic held, with it not even needing to end there. Godhood meant he'd never truly be gone unless he managed to do something exceptionally dumb. He'd ascend to a higher plane, sure, but he'd still be accessible, someone she could at least see through the nights of her long life and talk to through her days. She didn't doubt that watching him die of old age would be traumatic, but it now meant that she wouldn't have to actually lose him either, a fact that gave her incomparable comfort in the face of past fears. She still wasn't certain she was completely in control of, but of everyone else she knew who'd be doomed to die of old age or some more violent affliction, she'd still have him. And Yuzu too, I guess. She told herself, the thought making her smile. Maybe Jake and Amy if she manages to help them break through as well. Plus Uncle. When I think of it that way, I'll have the chance to have as active of a heavenly social life as Ben currently does, but for everyone else she'd have, all of it would mean so much less if he went off and got his soul extinguished in a way there was no coming back from. It almost felt unhealthy, how much his loss would destroy her. But he was her first real friend in life, the first person beyond her family to fully accept her, and the first one she'd met who'd become important enough to her to make her break through her old fears to the point that she'd been able to let herself fall in love. She cared about others, but she knew the feelings were on different scales, and with how she'd handled any time it looked like she might lose him in the past, either from injury or going missing, if his death were ever to be confirmed she already knew it would destroy her. Damn, I need a distraction. She didn't want to do anything, but she could already feel her thoughts spiraling, so without getting up she changed her focus and switched to materialization to help pass the time. Having gone through plenty of lessons of her own by that point to know what she was doing and only needing to direct her focus to the areas she still struggled with, keeping the scale of it under control. Something she could now do for any normal spell was still a struggle for that application of magic. Too much mana leaving too much product as grains of dust she tried to make came out as small stones that had to be slipped away in her ring, but it was still the perfect thing to practice to take her mind off her troubles, giving her at least a little bit of distraction. Another distraction, and at the perfect time too. It was only possible to do so many hours of materialization before it would grow stale, and she already felt past that point, leaving a minor headache for all of the thought she devoted to material properties and chemistry that could now be ignored to instead focus on how to grow next. Spirit embodiment had been a longer job than she'd been expected when she compared her levels and the passive growth she'd gained from any of her previous spirit jobs, but if it had been harder, that just meant the bonuses were better too. Taking that consolation as she touched her job crystal to look at all she had to choose from. Available jobs: musician, bard, darkness mage, charm specialized, staff user, empathy mage, barrier mage, a high crystallization mage, heretic, a mathematician, apprentice chef, a master of all. Still no new ones. Ugh. Her list had grown unreasonably small by that point, and the choices she had weren't even really choices. She had only a single advanced job option left, and it had her feeling stifled. Her growth was already great, and with the jobs she'd taken, her total bonuses had to be some of the best on the planet, but what she was seeing felt like a limit to that. She wanted more, but she couldn't help but to be limited by what she had. But I guess I could take a page out of Ben's book and see if that gives me anything. She thought after a moment. It'll shrink my list more, but it's not like it wasn't going to just keep shrinking after I take Master of All anyway. Okay, give me Empathy Mage. A far lower job would still help her grow, but that wasn't the main reason for her choice. Her non-affinity magic was at its 5th awakened level. Nothing compared to the Tier 1 empathy magic she'd gotten the job for, to the point that when she tried to form a complex empathy spell, casting it to understand the feelings of the entire town around her and being hit with an unexpected level of hope that the demi-demons had brought with them, she immediately got the expected notifications going off in her head. Give me High Empathy Mage, she thought, taking the advanced version the last choice had left her, hearing basically the same notifications and finishing it nearly just as fast, touching her crystal once more with a twinkle of hope but having it dashed as no new options showed up. Not that that was unexpected, even if it was disappointing. There was no Master Empathy Mage job for her because she hadn't mastered it. It had become a part of her broader non-affinity magic instead, and given her job paths from there that she'd long since finished. The idea that completing both of those might have yielded her a new path for that wasn't outrageous, but failing on that front wasn't a shock enough to keep her from going on as more jobs were taken for the hope it left her. This novel's true home is a different platform. Support the author by finding it there. Finishing all of her non-affinity mage jobs was what really mattered, and she hesitated briefly before touching her crystal once more, giving a small prayer before taking it in her grasp and finding yet more disappointment in the end. No new option within that magic path despite the hopes she'd held that finishing everything would yield at least a single advanced choice. Which means now I really don't have anything else, she sighed before giving in to what she had left. At least I'm ending on a good note. Give me Master of All. Name Thera Oris. Race: Succubus/Spirit Hybrid. Titles: Spirit Child, Madman's Lover, Spirit Princess, Saintess, Destined Holder of Spirit Empowering, Outsider Slayer, Friend of Elementals. Jobs: Master of All LV2. Previous jobs: Beginner Dancer, Dancer, Apprentice Mage, Earth Mage, True Mage, High Earth Mage, Spirit Mage, Life Mage, High Life Mage, Telekinetic Mage, Adventurer, High Telekinetic Mage, High Spirit Mage, Master Earth Mage, Earth Princess, Master Life Mage, Life Princess, Saintess, Crystallization Mage, Master Adventurer, Queen of Mana, Mana Embodiment, Dark Mage, High Dark Mage, Master Dark Mage, Dark Princess, War Mage, Annihilation Mage, Homunculus Creator, Chimera Maker, Non-Affinity Mage, Construct Mage, Professional Dancer, Healer, Master Spirit Mage, Spirit Embodiment, Empathy Mage, High Empathy Mage, Barrier Mage, High Barrier Mage, High Crystallization Mage. Attribute: a Vitality, 3390. A Vitality Recovery Rate, 60 per hour. Mana, 803,275. Mana Recovery Rate, 444 per minute. Strength, 805. Agility, 1498. Stamina, 1325. Intelligence, 1685. Affinities: a Light, 4. Life 22. Fire 11. Water 14. Air 12. Earth 103. Death 3. Dark 43. Space 2. Time 1. Resistances: a Light 5. Life 9. Fire 11. Water 16. Air 12. Earth 35. Death 13. Dark 42. Space 7. Time 8. Blessed Skills: Spiritual Earth Magic LV9*. Spiritual Dark Magic LV6*. Passive Skills: World Speak Plus. Coordination LV8. A Bind.
Spiritual Mana Enhancement LV0.
Earth Sense LV9. Dark Sight LV3. Magic Affinity LV4 *. Sacrilege LV1. Sleep Resistance LV4. Life Sense LV4. Dark Sense LV4. Earth Inclination LV0. Stress Resistance LV0. Intelligence Enhancement LV0. Active Skills. Calculate LV5. Dance LV6. String Instrument LV5. Woodwind Instrument LV4. Cleaning LV3. Staff Wielder LV2. Meditation LV3. Speed Reading LV7. Spiritual Life Magic LV9 *.
Overwhelming Non-Affinity Magic LV5 *. Mana Empowering LV4.
Cooking LV2.
Mana Examination LV9.
Spirit Comprehension LV6. Blessings. Analia's Blessing. Elvet's Life Magic Blessing. Quax's Blessing. Enetha's Blessing. Earth Pantheon's Blessing. Life Pantheon's Blessing. Dark Pantheon's Blessing. Yuzu's Mana Regeneration Blessing. Non-Affinity Pantheon's Blessing. Crafting Pantheon's Blessing. Trials. Trial of Analia and Talona. Earth Tower. Life Tower. Dark Tower. Non-Affinity Tower. Craftsman's Tower. The unexpected awakening left her to jump, expecting all eyes on her for the mana she'd taken in, but aside from some confused looks from the people around, nobody had seemed to have noticed what happened. It may have been a flash of mana, but to anyone not expecting it, it would have seemed like a flash of light instead, powerful even as her seventh awakened skill because of the volume of mana she held and as a result would absorb but still ultimately brief, leaving the few people around walking the streets to at most stop for a moment in curiosity before continuing on their way. Well, if this is going to be my last good job, at least I'm ending on a high note, she told herself. So what now? She didn't really want to go back to practicing her materialization. She didn't really want to keep training at all. She knew trying to grow with the time she had was important, but she wasn't Ben. It felt like it was taking up so much of the time she could be sure she'd have left. She wanted at least a bit of peace while she could get it. And there's only a few hours left before we need to get Mora. I don't need to use every minute of that time efficiently. So what do I want to do then? I think Aso is out with Sakhel and her party, so I can't bother either of them. Then, with the answer feeling annoyingly plain as soon as she asked herself that, she wanted to see Ben. Even if it had only been a day and she still wasn't happy with how he'd nearly killed himself in front of her without a word of warning. She had found her anger fading with his earnest apology, even if there were issues on that front as well. Because even if he's going to warn me first, that idiot is still going to try and get himself killed again. And yet, she still wanted his company. After all, despite what plans he may have had, the likeliest option still was that they'd all be dying in a few months anyway. She didn't want to waste too much of that time too mad to spend with someone she loved, so resigned to that fact she got up, back to Stonewall and what bit of peace it held. With images flashing so fast that to others they'd look blurry and indistinct. Ben sat and watched with all of the bodies he had, taking in information with interest as the known multiverse was laid out before him. Even as powerful as the Grey were, there were limits to what they could perceive if the laws a reality contained were too different. Some were just too alien from their perception, either holding too many spatial dimensions to be able to comprehend or worse, multiple time dimensions, but through all of that there was wonder and mystery. Universes that seemed empty and barren of life at first glance yet had towering structures that seemed designed by living minds, their construction able to be seen as it happened by either a strange law of that universe or else being made by other things their technology couldn't see, like the spirits of his current world. Realities that weren't empty but instead akin to primordial seas, with no void between their equivalents of stars, allowing all life that evolved within to access every other part of that great ocean as it spread, and so much more still. They were able to tell him of worlds using alien magics whose principles defied everything Ben had already learned, and things that were either gods or like gods who called it home and the ways they'd rule, forcing him to be just marginally more grateful for the ones he had to deal with in comparison. It was too soon to tell if worlds like the Greys, Pleiadians, and Earth were the outliers, holding no gods nor anything that could be called magic, At least not from his current sample size, and even not when looking at their total observations when comparing a million realities against a potentially endless multiverse, but all of it filled his interest and captured his imagination, with questions already forming in his head. Like, did the summoning and terraforming spells actually come from this universe originally? Given what we know, the timeline for some ancient civilization to have appeared and created these things currently doesn't make sense, but there are still errors in the current model of the universe. It's possible it's much older than it seems, but what if that's not the answer? What if something more advanced passed through from outside, played around a bit to figure out the rules, left some of its creations laying around to be found, and then just left for somewhere else? It's not exactly possible to know, but I sure as hell want to hope I can find an answer to that someday. Of course, a larger part of him knew that that someday would almost certainly never come, even if he had millennia to see it. How was he or anyone supposed to search out such answers in the cosmos when so many who might hold a clue about these ancient histories were going to be long dead? The two spells he had were by all accounts randomly discovered by some of the Void Gods too. Even if the terraforming spell may have at one point been in possession of a star race, he just didn't have any hope that enough information about their creators could have lasted to the present day. Which in itself is a shame, because one more spell would probably give me some easy access to new mana modifiers, but for now. The shop door opened, breaking his line of thought, and paused the displays as Thera entered, stopping as she noticed Quillith with him and all of the projections around. Sorry, am I interrupting? No, of course not. Quillith, you mind if we stop here and pick back up the next time? This story has been taken without authorization. Report any sightings. Of course, be well until then, Ben. The alien left from there, blinking out of existence with each of his displays, leaving the shop instantly emptier for Ben to focus his attention back on his girlfriend. And like that, I am completely free. What's up? Just wanted to spend some time with you. She could see his eyes light up as soon as the words left her mouth. And does that mean? Yes, you are somewhat forgiven for very traumatically almost dying on my lap. MMH. I appreciate that, but somehow the way you said it makes me kind of feel like I'm not. Largely forgiven, she clarified. But Ben, I took Master of All today. Oh, seriously? That's great. Yeah, and among other things, would you like to know one particular change that came with it? My gut is telling me I probably don't. Stress resistance, Ben. It gave me the skill stress resistance, and I do in fact blame you for that. To my meager defense, I'd like to think that all of your stress from work has been adding to that too. It's going to be around 50-50. But you know the worst part? Getting it didn't seem to lower my stress at all. It might not be so much lowering the amount of stress you feel, but the responses that come with it, he offered. High blood pressure, headaches, anxiety, that sort of thing. Oh joy, she said dryly before shaking her head. But, in my endless compassion, I'm trying to appreciate the fact that even if you seem bound and determined to die, I don't want to waste too much time being mad at you when we might all die anyway. She walked over as she said it, resting her chin on his shoulder and giving him just a bit of relief from the act. Man, having her mad at me sucks so much. A shame I'm about to completely blow it. Well, like I said before, if I'm going to do anything dangerous for power again, then even if I don't think I can tell you all of it, I'll at least let you know. Which is still not even remotely reassuring, but fine, she sighed in his ear, sounding resigned to the fact that he had no regard for his own safety. And on that note, Ben, she started, warning in her voice that wasn't enough to stop him. There's something a little dangerous I'm looking to try. Ugh, you're such a bastard. You know that? I literally just forgave you. You couldn't even wait a day before doing something again. I know. I'm the worst and I'm sorry, but it's going to affect how fast I can finish the third tier's jobs if this works, and I should be going to do the next group of them tomorrow, so I just want to know if it's possible first. Gods above, fine. So how hurt might you get? Should we try to grab another healer first? Ahem. So that's the thing, he started, suddenly sounding far more nervous for however Thera was going to react. The good news is that I'm pretty certain doing this isn't actually going to hurt me at all. And the bad news then? She asked through narrowed eyes, already seeing that wherever things were going, she wasn't going to like it. The bad news is that if things go wrong, And I want to clarify that I really don't think they will. I'm going to need you to cut my arm off. I think I'm retracting my forgiveness. Honestly, fair. But fine, she went on, pinching her brow as she did. Even if it seems like you're already trying to get me to level my stress resistance, I'd rather know, so let's get this over with. Are we doing it here? No, it's just a small walk. Come on. You know, now that I can see what you're about to do, it's somehow an even worse idea than I was expecting. Thera sighed. I wonder why I can't fix whatever's wrong in your head to make you like this. All right, kind of hurtful. Yeah? And if things go as wrong as you're expecting, but I'm not able to cut off your arm in time, how bad do you think it will get? I mean, I still have absolute confidence that you'll be able to handle things. Sure, I'm just going to have to either cut off even more of your limbs or break a bunch of your bones. Just do it already before I change my mind about this. Yes, ma'am. Wasting no time, as he stood among the branches that filled his greenhouse, Ben held tight the crystal in his hand and the souls it contained before connecting to them, forging a link and pulling them both within his mind. Trapped since his death, the god Quox waited, aware enough to swear he'd have both his freedom and revenge. Revenge against the gods of that world who'd spent centuries mistreating him, allowing him to starve all for the crime of saving himself. Revenge against Analia, the conniving bitch who'd lied to him to strengthen one of her believers, and most important of all, revenge against the mortal who'd killed him, the little whelp who'd done it with such glee, all for whatever strength he could claim for himself. For all of that, and then whatever they'd been doing to him since. He could feel it, his divine shape being forced to change, bent and contorted to fill a vessel unnatural to him. How he didn't outright kill the thing he was being put in he didn't know, and the few senses it held were weak, but one thing he was aware of was the plucking. Like having scales ripped out one by one, only in a duller, more muted way, but as the biggest sense of stimuli he had, not knowing when it would come made it all the more detestable. He was a god, as high as an existence could be, and no matter what he'd done, he would not stand for the treatment he'd received. Rewa? Came a groan of the monster beside him, his sole companion, that he was all the worse for having, as the demon at his side continued to make noise, with everything he'd been through shared by that same beast. Both of them were dead, two souls trapped together for eternity until something could free them, with the question of what that would mean not something that could be escaped when Quox didn't truly understand his state. When a god was killed while descended onto a mortal, then that was the end of them, but their souls were meant to depart the mortal plane when it happened, disappearing like any other. His though had not, left trapped and contained and providing just the slimmest amount of hope. What was a god if not a soul? Sure, they had shape and form beyond the ethereal, but that was something they'd grow into themselves with time. In essence, they were spiritual beings, and with that fact came hope. He hadn't passed on. He'd in essence been ripped from the body that held him, which came with the chance that if he could only get out, he'd be able to ascend to his proper place once more. An ascension that would leave him surrounded on all sides by enemies, but that was a different matter. As long as he could sneak off, then he would live, and even if escaping would mean he wouldn't get to carry out revenge himself, he could at least take comfort in the fact that all he hated would still be doomed. Wow, it's cute you can still feel so much hate and hope. A familiar voice spoke around him, putting him on edge as the first thing beyond the demon he'd heard in years. I wonder if you'll still be able to feel so big after this? The empty existence around Quox changed, resolving itself into a vast space reminiscent of a barren realm, letting him perceive himself and the demon, but more importantly, the one other, the sight telling him whose voice he'd heard as he growled out. You! Me! Ben grinned back. Been a while, Quox. I guess I never saw what you originally looked like, but you're definitely worse for wear. He could see in the god's memories how he thought he should appear, but it seemed the time trapped within a plant had changed him in unexpected ways. Both the god and demon had created constructs within the mindscape he'd created, but they were gaunt. A thinness not of starvation, but instead looking stretched out. Small branches poked through their skin with the buds of leaves too, and both had a small, green tint that came naturally to neither, enough to make him wonder if enough years trapped in a tree would turn any deity into a nature god. Did you know this text is from a different site? Read the official version to support the creator. Something to experiment on in the future, he told himself, For now, let's see what will come of this. He had more to say too, but didn't get the chance. As soon as he'd spoken, the god lunged, reaching out to Ben in hate and rage to strike him with all of the strength he held, only for his clawed hand to be stopped on contact, powerless to do anything. So this is the god of growth and gain? Powerless to do anything against the mortal that killed you? Ben taunted, getting the reaction he wanted as the god rampaged in his fury, trying to kill the mortal before him with all of the power he held but consistently failing. No strike so much as making Ben take a step back, let alone cause any true harm. Now, you may be an evil bastard whose greatest feat is being so dumb as to accidentally help doom the galaxy even more than it already was, but you're also in luck, Ben said through the blows. You want your freedom? Well, now's your chance. It was enough to put a pause to the mad deity, freezing him mid-attack. What? Now, obviously I'm not just going to let you out, Ben clarified. You should know you're trapped, and no matter how much of an idiot you are, even if you don't understand what's currently happening, you should see you're still trapped, and the only way you're escaping is if you figure out how to use me to get out, and you have until I'm too bored to keep giving you this chance. Of course, I really wouldn't recommend letting me get to that point. Or what? The god scoffed. You'll kill me? Oh, Quox, you have no clue what a valuable resource you are to me, Ben sighed. Kill you? You're never getting that sort of release. Your options are escape now or see how much worse than death things can get. Something about the way the mortal said it made the god believe for just a moment before breaking free of the feeling. Worse than death? He was already trapped and used in ways he didn't understand. What worse could there be? No, whatever would come didn't matter because, in his hubris, the boy before him had made a mistake. He may not have been affected by the physical strikes, but he was a child before a god. A fate worse than death? He was going to make that boy see hell, leave him begging for release right until the moment he reclaimed his freedom. Seriously, are you done already? Ben asked in disappointment. It's only been a month. The god didn't answer, slumped on the ground in his defeat. Everything he'd tried had failed, not leaving so much as a scratch. The apostle before him was completely unharmed and left looking all the more terrifying for it, while the god had exhausted himself, not having any faith to use in the first place, but now feeling the mental strain in a far realer way than any since he'd first been killed, not even having the strength to reply as Ben crouched down to his level, offering a hand. Come on now, don't be like that, he tried to encourage. Do your best and just try to possess me. Take me over and conquer me in mind and body. You can do it if you really put your mind to it, can't you? The great god Quox didn't betray the planet that gave him a home, only to amount to this, did he? Welling just a bit of strength, no longer from rage but a simple need to prove himself, Quox took hold of the offered hand and tried anything he could, entering the body or reading the mind it held, applying more mental attacks no matter how all he'd tried had already failed, only to get the same thing he'd had for every other day. Nothing. He didn't know what the thing before him was. Mortal was clearly not the right word for that monster. But he could do nothing to him. A beast fully immune to the touch of that weakened deity and grinning all of the deeper for it in the end. So it looks like as far as god souls go, they're harmless to me. Excellent. Even if it wasn't what he'd been hoping for. He couldn't deny the power his combination of eldritch mind and evil god of sacrilege held. He still didn't know how he'd fare against a proper deity in the world, but in a mindscape against one who was nothing more than a soul, the difference was insurmountable. Well, I guess you just didn't have it in you in the end, Ben said in mock sorrow, shaking his head in a disappointment that the deity at his feet couldn't even respond to. A shame, an absolute shame, but oh well. If we're being serious, then this really was the exact result I was hoping for, and since you can't do anything, it looks like nobody is going to be mad about the results. Speaking of, let's see. I told Thera to cut my arm off after 10 seconds if it came down to it, so I'll just spend another 4 on my own tests and then keep going after I confirmed I'm fine with her, but oh, look at me, rambling to a sample like it's a person. Sorry. Let's stop making you wait and get this started already. Quox didn't know what any of that meant, and he didn't have the leeway to try and figure it out. Where there had been one Ben at first, there were suddenly thousands, ripping him apart and filling the space with the sounds of his screams for months to come. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Thera counted out, stopping as Ben placed down the crystal he'd been holding and showing her his empty hands. Well then, I'm fine. Looks like I'm immune to anything a god's soul might try against me. And did you at least get anything from this little experiment? Oh, so much. Just gotta wait to see if I'll be able to get even more. With his and Quox's perceptions of time being boosted to his maximum, Ben had, in essence, turned those short seconds into months within his mind to experiment with the limits of his sacrilege, and he wasn't going to stop. There were other benefits he'd been hoping for too among them. It seemed they'd just take slightly longer to confirm, but it didn't matter. In any mind space he'd create, he had all of the time in the world, and feeling the absolute truth of that fact, he once more picked up the crystal before fitting it into one of the many training bands on his arm, connecting to it again while a different part of him focused back on Thera and smiled. So, should we go grab our kid? Ben, why are you a god now? Mora asked in naked confusion when he arrived, perking up Dallaire, Fontesh, and Sakhel, who were all in the room with them in shock and surprise as he scooped the boy up. Because I managed to have a very, very productive day yesterday, he laughed. More importantly, did you have a good time? You behaved for Fontesh, didn't you? He did, but I don't think that's more important, the Dryad told him, looking between him and the others. Mora, what are you talking about? I hit the 3rd tier, Ben explained. It's a long story, Dash. It's really not, Thera cut in. Okay. It's not, but there's some details to it that might not be great to bring up around the kiddos. Either way, I'm fine and powerful, and I'm going to politely ask you all to not spread that fun fact around if you can avoid it. And why are you wearing a different god? Mora asked him while the rest of them were struggling to process what they'd already been told before that new tidbit was thrown into the mix, getting a wink for the question. Training. Again, don't worry about it too much. You've seen me wear souls before, right? This is the same sort of thing. An answer that appeased the child at least, but left the adults in the room only with more questions. But it was Dallaire who managed to squeeze a word in next, her eyes positively gleaming. What skill, she asked, overflowing with curiosity while Ben cleared his throat. My mind skills, so I'm a mind god now, he said, trying to keep it simple, and cast a small look to the soul spirit in his arms. Mora catching on and not adding anything from there while his student's energy dropped. Oh, so not your crafting? She asked, instantly sounding less interested and leaving him to chuckle. I guess that's still cool. Can you do anything new then? Ha, a bunch, but seeing as most of the changes are going to be in my head, one of the more interesting bits is going to be how my attributes have grown, he said, materializing a handful of metal and squeezing it, letting the others in the room watch as it deformed in his grasp. I am substantially more powerful, and going to be a real, genuine god, Sakhel repeated as she blinked. Wow, just wow. Wait, should I be offering you prayers now? She was slowly bringing her hands together as she asked, only being stopped as Ben materialized a plank of wood between them. Don't you dare. I'm not dead yet, I haven't ascended, so I'm still mortal. I'm just a 3rd tier, and while that is exceptionally cool, everyone just treat me the same. This isn't even the skill I was trying to get to this tier. How do you accidentally become a 3rd tier? Fontesh asked him in naked disbelief, getting to see her question immediately bring him down. By not considering how my big attempt to reach it might technically apply better for another skill I've had at the 9th level for a while longer, but it's fine. What's done is done, and I'm going to keep trying to awaken that one too. Anyway, it's getting a bit late, so we should head home. Dallaire, I'll see you tomorrow for lessons. Fontesh, thanks again for watching Mora. And Sakhel, just remember that anything Myriad has to say about my awakening is probably just slander that should be ignored. He wasn't tired, but he still forced himself to sleep since he hadn't the night before, dropping the connection to the god he was wearing as he forced his mind to a higher realm, finding 3 more staring him down when he arrived. Ben. Myriad. Should I even ask? Do I even want to know? I mean, seeing how it looks like you were all waiting for me, I take it you at least kind of want to know. What are you doing with Quox's soul? Hellori asked him, her own curiosity trumping Myriad's expected horror. Well, I have enough fruit in storage that I'll be fine as far as potions go for the next couple years, so leaving him there was really kind of a waste, Ben said innocently as the rest searched his face for whatever he was skating around. And you know me, I just love my efficiency and all. Which means what? Which means you're looking at the evil god of sacrilege. Just this once, I'm putting a bit more emphasis on the evil. They all stared at him as he said it, waiting for him to be a bit less coy as he finally gave in, giving an exaggerated sigh. The tail has been illicitly lifted. Should you spot it on Amazon, report the violation. Okay. Fine, but all of you just do me a favor and be cool. First, you guys are the only ones that know, right? You blocked everyone else from seeing you, didn't you? Nair asked him. How would anyone else have noticed? One of you three feeling chatty or more likely looking through Thera? He tried to extend his anti-god privacy effect to her too, and he felt somewhat confident it had worked, but without verification. He didn't actually know how it had turned out, with Myriad being the one to answer. I believe it worked, although later try and block someone from my site, but not yourself, and we can confirm. As things stand though, since nobody's raised a fuss yet, I'm comfortable saying nobody else knows. Of course, if anyone else pokes around in your lover's thoughts while she happens to be thinking about what you did, then the secret's going to be out, Hellori added. Whatever it happens to be. Yeah, okay, I get it already. So, long story short, I'm torturing Quox for power. I got some results, but it is going worse than I'd admittedly hoped. Either I need way more experience than I was expecting, or else the experience rate of how I'm doing it is abysmal. Probably even a bit of both. Elaborate on that, his god asked him, suddenly seeming significantly more weary as he listened to what Ben had to say as the boy tapped the side of his head. I've said it before, time is relative, and I'm trying my best to take advantage of that fact. I'm still limited by my flesh, but within my mind I'm not, which has created a number of opportunities for me. For one, pulling Quox into my head and, well, like I said before, torturing him is an avenue to not only try and raise my skills but also finish third-tier jobs even faster. Admittedly, the whole mind user pairing would probably do it too, as things currently stand with how much experience I'm sure my new thought structure is going to generate compared to what it was like before, but it never hurts to have a second option, and considering that I should be getting a couple new sacrilege variants when I complete a few new master paths, I'm honestly in great shape for getting them done. Of course, if I don't end up with more sacrilege options, then we can always find a few people who have access to the heretic job. Even if there's not going to be many, there has to be at least a couple. Hell, both Thera and Greed would be options for it. That just leaves so many further questions, Myriad muttered, leaving Hellori to take over. All right, for now, what exactly do you mean by torture? Hellori asked him, sounding genuinely concerned. I know your morality can be, shall we say, complex, but what exactly are you doing? Well, for the first few years, I was experimenting with my sacrilege, but I think I've figured out everything I can on how to use it when it comes to mental and spiritual fronts, so all of that is being applied for what experience it would give me, along with the simple fact that doing such things to a god in general should be acting as experience as well. Empty skies. You really are trying to level your sacrilege again, aren't you? Yeah, among other things too, but it's going worse than I expected. Honestly, with just how many centuries I've put towards it, the fact I haven't gotten my level yet is honestly a bit disheartening. Centuries? Nair asked in disbelief. Ben, it's been a few hours. Just what even is your current mental speed? How is the mere act of existing not driving you insane? Gotta remember that one of the original skills that my mind grew into was focus. That probably helps. Aside from the mind I have interacting with the world, the rest of me doesn't really seem capable of boredom anymore, and as for the parts of myself I have handling Quox, well, it's not a perfect description, but they're kind of subroutines of myself, if that makes sense. They know what they have to do, and they do it. Of course, it gets a bit more complicated than that because they aren't separate from me in any way. All parts of myself are aware of what the rest are doing, but honestly, trying to explain my current mental structure is going to be a pain for both you and me, so let's just leave it at a firm, I'm fine. Are you? Myriad asked him. Ben, deserved or not, inflicting centuries of torture can't be good for you mentally. Why not? I know the gods do it, they're just hands-off about it so they can feel free of guilt, like all they've done is inflict punishment and that's the end of it. Every time any god of this world has ever condemned a mortal to hell is for less than what any one of the forbidden gods have done when compared to the level of harm they've had to have inflicted by bringing the demons into the system. Damn, you all know there's been talks about sending me to hell, and I've done both infinitely less damage and more good. Yes, the fact that I'm doing this is messed up, and the fact that I don't really feel anything about it is probably more so, but I don't really care. If there's some sort of afterlife paradise waiting for me after I go through whatever true death is waiting past godhood, then I'm sure I've already blocked myself from its doors, but this is a choice I've made and I stand by it. The entire time I'd been using Quox until today, he'd never felt a bit of repentance or shame for what he'd done. Only thinking about revenge, so if that garbage excuse for a god can be used for something worthwhile in the world, I'm going to use it. I regret wanting to know, Myriad sighed. But fine, regardless of the frankly horrific optics of this, you aren't wrong that he and the other forbidden gods should by all rights have had their souls banished to hell, but I need to say, I feel like one day we'll need to have a long conversation about empathizing with those you don't actually like. I'd like to point out that the people I don't like are largely those who want me dead or worse, and I refuse to ever be the bigger man. Of course you do, Myriad groaned. So anything else? What other new and horrific details could have popped up in your life in the single day since you've awakened your skills? Oh, nothing too much, really. Although I do have my own realm now, which is pretty neat. What? I told you I got a skill called Realm Access, right?
Ben shrieked.
It looks like the realm I get to access is my own. It's pretty cool, though. Since someone is very rudely keeping me from spending 100% of my time here, it gives me a different place to send a part of myself. Ben, are you really just going to slowly grab hold of everything that should be a domain of the gods while you're still alive? I'd be doing it quickly if I could. Ugh. I know you're in a hurry to get yourself killed, but please, consider living the longest, healthiest life you can. I'm already worried about seeing how things go when you ascend. Hey now, a long, healthy life is literally all that I want. It's the rest of the universe that seems to want to get in the way of that. Laying down in his bed, Mora stared at the ceiling above, not spending the night enjoying any of the books or games he'd been given, but instead lost in his thoughts now that he was finally home, being back in Stonewall reminding him of the disaster he'd left it in. There were no signs of Bloom's carnage left. Ben having fixed it all, but the memories were still there, eating at him and his shortcomings. His own childishness, something he was usually good at managing, had been the cause of that disaster, and he had nobody to blame but himself, even if he knew that wasn't entirely fair for him either. He was young and inexperienced, still figuring out how to be a member of the world he lived in and struggling with it each day, with even trying to fully understand how to connect to others being a challenge that was only manageable thanks to the people who wanted to connect with him back making the effort he was failing in. And he knew that parts of it would get better with time too, but only parts. Inexperience was one thing that could be overcome as he learned more about the world and how he'd fit in it. When he wasn't even 1 year old, it felt like everything was still new. The real issue was that he didn't actually know if time would solve all of his problems. He was something that shouldn't have existed. Something he knew that shouldn't have existed. A child spirit, the only one in the world, which was a fact that left an unavoidable question in his mind. Would he ever be able to grow up? That wasn't something spirits did after all, and he didn't know what it would mean for him to do such a thing. Technically, as a great spirit, there was nowhere else to grow. He knew he wasn't immortal despite certain similarities. His attributes were fixed by his very nature, and while his appearance was that of a child, he could change the shape of the mana that made up his body if he so desired, but that wouldn't fix where the real issue lied. His mind. The mental structure of a spirit warped to fit the shape of a young incubus and creating something that was simultaneously both. What he needed was to one day mature beyond what he currently was, but he didn't even know if that was possible. He didn't think with a brain. He wouldn't experience the things that changing with age and puberty would bring, and he had no biology to help shape his nature. The odds seemed far too good that he'd be forced to stay that way forever, a victim of the careless experiment that was his creation and a fact that he wanted to escape. While not feeling rushed to grow up, he didn't want to be eternally young either. He didn't want his more youthful impulses to affect his decision-making, and he didn't want to be causing problems for the people around him forever. More importantly, he didn't want to make those same people eventually grow to hate him if he couldn't change. Neither Thera nor Ben had blamed him for what had happened. They'd both been supportive and helpful in trying to make it right, but even if he tried his best, Mora couldn't help but worry that he'd make a mistake of a similar scale again. How many times could he mess up before they'd get tired of him? How much could he fail before they'd get rid of him too, like the life and death spirits before them? This story originates from Royal Road. Ensure the author gets the support they deserve by reading it there. He absolutely didn't want that. He liked being with them, liked living with them and Sonia, and liked being able to spend time with Delaire and her family too. Compared to his life after birth, what he had now was irreplaceable, which made the thought of losing it all the scarier. But then what? He asked himself. I can wonder all I want, but I still don't know how to grow. He looked at the other spirits flooding the house, using Thera's mana to grow their numbers and replenish their supplies, but knew they wouldn't be able to help him. While some of the new varieties of spirits might have needed a bit more experience to fully develop into who they were, his problem was a mortal one despite not being such a thing himself, which made it all of the harder to solve. I wish I'd just been born immortal, he thought sadly. Then I wouldn't have these problems. But why wish for what could never happen? It was what he tried to tell himself at least. He knew his nature was unchangeable, but still the thought kept coming back. If he was mortal, then sure, there'd be plenty of unfortunate things he'd have to deal with. He'd have to eat and he'd have to sleep. He'd have to deal with what was sure to be a number of less obvious biological needs, and he'd probably experience physical pain too, which admittedly looked rather unpleasant when he thought back to the various examples of it he'd seen, but he'd also stopped being limited by what he was. Despite what seemed like only drawbacks, he felt himself long for it, an existence he could never have, at least until the point where his two different natures met offered a solution. He might not be able to become mortal, but wasn't there an option he could take that would be close enough? It was something that barely fell within his realm of power. The only question was to the degree he could make it work, but just the thought alone was making him excited as he started consulting the system, asking it questions and taking its answers, trying to figure out how to turn the idea into reality. After all, it in a sense already controlled the biology of the planet, allowing levels of hybridization that could have never occurred in nature. His very existence was a testament to that, but as surprising as he was to the original Great Spirits, he considered two other examples to be far more curious. Both Thera and Saren were hybrids of a higher order, mixing matter and mana in a way that seemed impossible to achieve, and the details of just how it had been done were recorded within the system itself, only waiting to be accessed as Mora processed the information, feeling surprised himself by the end. So that's how it managed it? I'm not sure I really understand, but if it works, well, I should be able to too, right? He spent only a little longer thinking it over, wanting to be sure he had the details right before he finally got up and, not bothering to use the door, walked to Thera and Ben's room through the wall between them, watching the two as they slept. A part of him wondered if he should wait for them to wake up first and talk about it, but a larger part thought it was fine. After all, Thera had said to ask them if he was ever unsure about what he was doing, but he fully believed it was harmless, and besides, he didn't want to risk them saying no. I guess I'll need to get a space spirit's help after I start, but there's a couple around. Okay, I can do this. Nervous as he was, the dominant feeling in him was excitement, both for the change and the chance to see how it would turn out as he started gathering what he'd need and casting his spell, giving shape to exactly what he wanted. So, I guess I should probably ask now before it matters. How many people already know I'm a third tier? Has some announcement been made about it? Ben asked the gods as the night wore on, all of them still looking exhausted from the conversations before and leaving Myriad to answer. I personally haven't made the rest of my believers aware, considering how many live in town with you and in Analia too. I'd assumed you'd want some privacy on the matter until you'd said otherwise. I do, thanks. No problem, however, I also wouldn't be surprised if the matter comes out of your hands. All of the gods are aware and they all have opinions on it, let's be clear on that. I wouldn't be shocked if at least a few of some of their more core believers are already aware, especially the ones you have your problems with. MMH fair. Do you think I should expect some trouble then? I don't see how you could. Hellori shrugged. Your authority is higher than any of theirs now, and it's not even close, although I suppose I could see some with slightly stronger values having words for you. If anyone tries anything, then just make the difference between you clear and be done with it. Or you could attempt to deal with it after consulting me. Myriad cut in. I'd rather not learn secondhand how you think it would be appropriate to deal with it. God. The lack of trust hurts so much. I've watched you blow up Inetha's church. Yeah, and? What does that have to do with anything? It's the fact that you don't know that's the problem, but... Oh, that's interesting. What? Hopefully, something that will be enough of a shock to you to make up for all you put me through. You should go down and wake up. Probably wake Thera as well. Am I about to be murdered down there? Ha, not this time, although perhaps that would be less shocking. Narrowing his eyes, Ben considered just reading the cube's mind before thinking better of it. If it was dangerous, then Myriad would have let him know, and since it seemed like he'd see soon enough himself, he could let his god have his surprise. And if it's bad enough, I'll just go get revenge. Nice and easy. He told himself as he dropped his mind down to a lower layer of reality, feeling well-rested as he gently started shaking Thera awake. MMH, what? Thera groaned, keeping her eyes shut. Think we might need to get up. It feels too early and I don't even smell breakfast yet. Yeah, and I'll get on that, but Myriad said there's something going on and he told me to wake you too. Are we going to die? He said no. Then can I go back to sleep and you can deal with it? What? He teased. Thera ignoring the will of a god. That's not like you. Ugh. That's because you're a bad influence on me, she said as she finally opened her eyes. Plus, I think you reaching the 3rd tier might have permanently shaken my faith. Arbeta, did you know this story is from Royal Road? Read the official version for free and support the author. That sounds hurtful. Did reaching that tier make you feel worthy of being worshipped? No, but that's a trick question. No gods are really worthy of worship. So, are you getting up? Ah, fine. It was nothing in their room at least, nor the living room either. The kitchen was untouched and so was the washroom, with few options left as they looked between each other. Can't your god tell you what we're supposed to be looking for? This is starting to feel spooky, and if I find out we have someone living in our walls or something, then I'm going to lose it. He won't tell me, but I'm pretty comfortable saying it's not that one. Come on. Maybe Mora did something. A thought that couldn't help but tense them just a bit. They walked over to his room next, knocking on the door. Mora, it's me and Thera. Is everything okay in there? Can we come in? Yeah. A voice called back, sounding off as it spoke and leaving the two to look at each other once more, left with a suspicion that they'd found whatever they were supposed to as they opened it, both of them shocked by what they'd discovered. You're both awake early? The child within said, for it undeniably was a child, with dark hair and a pale complexion. The thin tail of an incubus wrapped around his waist, making them almost look like one proper, barring a few minor details. Clearly male. Ben couldn't help but take note of how some of the features he was seeing resembled his own, and leaving one detail to stand out more than any other. His eyes, light and ethereal, didn't seem to be made of flesh, instead being made of the same essence of a ghost that lingered in the world. Or a soul spirit.
Mora.
Thera asked, sounding unsure of herself even as she said it. Is that you? It is. What happened here, buddy? Ben questioned next. You're looking a little different. Ah, well, that, the boy said, scratching his head but looking unused to the action, the flesh and form undoubtedly feeling vastly different from what he was before. I decided to make myself a body. Okay, I see that, kiddo. Why though? I thought having something I could actually age in might help me mature. I feel like he's learned to give answers like that from you, Thera muttered, leaving Ben to go on. All right, Mora. Is there a reason you wanted to mature? No, not really, he said, his face screaming that he was lying now that he had one in proper. I just didn't know if I'd be able to really grow up as a spirit. I thought having skin and a brain might help. It was a lot to process, but regardless of if he was hiding something, what he said wasn't entirely wrong. His unique nature did leave the question of whether he'd grown and mature with time. Trying to think with a brain might have been the exact structure he'd need for it. And you're not permanently trapped in there? Thera asked, looking worried. You can get out if you need to? I can. He nodded, raising his mana arm out of the physical one and letting his new flesh fall limp to his side before putting it back in. I'm just acting as a soul for a homunculus. That's all. That's all. He had a lot of comments for that in particular but held his tongue. Figuring out how to respond appropriately was already a challenge when he felt like he was still missing details of why the boy had decided he'd wanted a body, but there didn't seem to be much harm to it, even if both he and Thera were left with one question still. All right, Mora. I'm still not really sure I get it, but if you want this then that's fine. Thera told the boy as she looked him over, beginning to notice what Ben had seen in the beginning. But there's still one thing. Where did you get this? I made it. Not a completely surprising answer given the life and death affinities that had birthed him had power over flesh. It wasn't the most shocking that such a thing was still considered within the realm of soul magic despite that affinity's name, but it wasn't entirely the answer either was looking for, with Thera prompting him to go on. I more meant how. With my magic. Mora, sweetheart. I'm not upset, but you're very clearly avoiding a question I'm already guessing the answer to. I just took a couple of cells from you and Ben and smushed them together, he said with a pout. You already have spaces in your biology that fit your spirit nature and Ben's male. Combining the two gave me exactly what I needed for a comfortable vessel that I thought would match me. Do I want to ask where you took these cells from us? Oh, I pulled out a couple of your hairs, he explained, looking even more embarrassed. I'm sorry. Okay. No, hair is fine, but... She trailed off, having no idea how to approach any of that and turning to face Ben for some help, getting a small shrug before he took over. But, since you now officially have your own flesh and blood body, I guess I should start breakfast. Your first meal on the planet. Huh? I'll have to make it a good one. Do I really need to do this? Mora asked as he sat at the table, staring down the plate of food in front of him as his face twisted. It just looks so weird. Mora, if you're going to be using a body, that means keeping it alive, Ben told him. It's a big responsibility. If you're going to do this, then you need to take care of it. Ben, you're making it sound like taking care of a pet, Thera sighed. I mean, it's not entirely different. Besides, just give it a bite. I can already tell you think it smells good. I don't even know what that means, the boy told him while Ben laughed. Maybe you don't yet, but you're currently undergoing a biological response to the food in front of you that all of us fleshies refer to as drooling. Just put a little in your mouth, chew it, and swallow. If you really, really hate the experience, then there's always the option of getting out of there and using your mana to direct it to eat, but if you're trying to go for the full mortal experience, then this really is a defining part you can't skip. Trust me, even if it feels weird at first, you'll learn to love it. MMH, okay? He finally gave in, lifting his fork and with a doubtful look put it in his mouth, his entire expression changing for it as Ben grinned back. Good. I don't know. I think so. He kept eating despite saying that. Even if mentally he wasn't sure, experiencing senses his true form wasn't capable of. He was currently linked to the body he wore, and it at least was certain of the quality it had received. Craving more the instant it got its first taste and letting the other two watch as the boy devoured his first meal, smiling happily as they did. Another issue with having a body is going to be keeping it clean though, Thera said as she gently wiped the boy's face with a napkin when he was done. I guess there's going to be a lot of little things to practice, but you'll slowly get used to them, although now, what are we going to do about today? Her eyes turned back to Ben when she asked, uncertainty about how to handle such a turn of events, as the plans she thought she had were instantly warped. Should she go to work with the boy like she had been doing that entire time? There were no obvious problems with it, but it was easy to imagine something popping up too that might need to be dealt with, and even if she was perfectly equipped to handle any issue that a mortal body might have, trying to deal with it in a busy hospital with people dying all around them would only add another layer of stress. Why not stay with me today then? Ben asked. The biggest issues I can imagine are going to be getting Mora used to his new senses, and he'll have to deal with plenty in the shop that'll be worse than anything at home, but hopefully not as potentially nauseating as whatever you might find in a hospital. Plus, I'll be around to help out too. MMH. They do know I'll occasionally miss days if an emergency pops up, and I'm willing to say this qualifies, Thera muttered. And I am basically a volunteer anyway. It's not like I'm marked as a member of staff anywhere, and there have been less and less injuries recently as other healers improve, but MMH, maybe I'll take a half day. If I show up in the afternoon, they can deal with it. That's the spirit. Okay, Mora. Looks like you guys are with me today, so come on. Let's go have some fun. Standing in front of the boy, touching his chest and with a pout on her face. Delaire's initial excitement at the surprising change couldn't help but deflate when she'd realized an inescapable fact of it. So I can't stick my arm through you anymore? Why do you enjoy that so much anyway? Mora asked back, his own confusion plain, with no experience controlling his face to keep his every emotion as anything less than obvious. It's not that exciting. You wouldn't understand, she said, shaking her head but not elaborating further, only looking disappointed until Mora broke down and removed one of his spiritual arms from his new flesh and let it pass through her, bringing a laugh back to the girl's face while Ben and Thera watched from the side. Well, if they're happy then it's fine, Thera said, understanding no more than Mora why the young girl enjoyed his intangibleness so. But do you think this is going to be okay? Soft maybe. It's not like he's actually fully become the soul of a body. If something bad enough happens to it, it shouldn't kill him, but I can imagine the potential pain being decently traumatic, even if he were to go back to just living like a great spirit. Ugh, I have so many new concerns, she complained before pausing a moment, looking at Ben from the side. And what do you think about this? Ensure your favorite authors get the support they deserve. Read this novel on Royal Road. It's interesting. Honestly, I'd go so far as to say super interesting. I wonder if all of the regular soul spirits could do this too. For that matter, I wonder if the life and death spirits can. It seems like Knox is less acting like the soul of the corpse he uses than he is puppeting it. How do you think any of them would react to getting to experience a mortal life in any way or think with a mortal brain? If that really is happening, of course. Hard to judge when Mora doesn't let me read his mind, but maybe I'll ask him permission to peek later. Yeah, I should have known you'd be way too interested in this, she sighed. But that wasn't entirely what I was talking about. He used us to make a body. Do you not have any particular feelings about that? What? Like he was trying to more firmly become our child? He asked, being rewarded with the sight of Thera freezing at the bluntness before answering. Yeah, I guess. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me. It probably would have been better to talk to us about it first, but if he was looking for attention, well, it's cute. Cute. Sure, he's still a bit clumsy at expressing himself, but he's trying, of course it's cute. And if he is more firmly trying to cement himself as our kid, or at the very least a part of our family, well, I care about him and you care about him and we aren't planning on abandoning him anytime soon, right? Right? I don't know. Ha, I know you don't want any, but part of that comes from the lifespan issue, right? Well, we've gone and adopted one that's going to even outlive you. Does that help make you a bit more comfortable with all of this? It's not that. I've already committed to looking after him for as long as he needs it. My mother made sure of that when you were dealing with Bloom, but if we were to have a kid in, a slightly more normal way than how Mora just did that, do you think they'd look like that? Ah, so the issue is that Mora doing this has made you more conscious of kids in general, gotcha. Didn't need you to just spell it out for me. Ha! But that's also very cute, he said with a wink, getting lightly elbowed in return. But as for how they'd look, I mean, yeah, I guess that's probably pretty close unless Mora specifically tried to over or underexpress specific traits when he made it. He's actually really interesting to look at. The eyes obviously come from you. They're just presenting his soul affinity instead of your earth, but it's pretty obvious that a few of the other traits he's presenting are coming from your succubus half instead of me. If we did have kids, it would be neat to see where the earth affinity stays strong. Would it always be eyes? Windows to the soul and all that, as they say, but I could see hair too. Ha, I wonder if Mora had been presenting his nature there, if he would have been bald? Skin would have been a bad one too, probably, seeing as how if it presented through his soul affinity, that might have meant a transparent view to his muscles beneath, but then, maybe both are already being presented there in some way I'm just not noticing. We don't know how your body works either, do we? But Mora said that your biology was useful for making him a vessel. You're both probably flooded with mana in ways a more typical mortal wouldn't be. And now you sound more like a biologist than anything else. So this really hasn't made you feel weirdly conscious at all?
No, sorry.
I mean, sure it was a surprise, but I don't think this would even make my top 10 since coming to this world. You're right, if I wanted to compare feelings, then I'd need to do it with someone with an actually normal life. She sighed. Auntie will be good to talk to when she finds out. Thank the gods there's one other normal person in our household. Okay, Not only am I offended for multiple reasons, but you don't get to count yourself as a normal member of the household either. Miss First Half Spirit, Succubus and Spirit Princess, contender for 2 different skills, and holder of nearly 1,000,000 points of mana. I'm not a princess to the succubi. And that was literally the only point you could refute.
Ok, fine.
Auntie Sonia is the only normal one that lives with the rest of us freaks and weirdos, but it's still a matter of scale. If she's a 1 and you're a 10, then me and Mora are both 4s tops. Why exactly am I 60% weirder than you? Thera laughed. Oh, not 60%. This isn't a straight scale, it's exponential. I'm literally just a little guy. You're not little, and I don't even have the time or energy to list off everything about you the way you just did about me, so let's just leave it at the fact that you somehow have 2 third-tier skills and are aiming for more, and I'll let you figure out the rest yourself with. That crazy brain of yours, which you can no longer deny, by the way. You can't have a 3rd-tier mind skill and pretend your mind is still sane. I can pretend all sorts of things. Ha, they say crazy people don't stop to wonder if they're crazy. All right. I can see I'm going to be slandered for a bit today, so hold that thought for just a moment. In all of his experiments on Quacks, he'd found more than a few useful aspects of his new skills, with one that could be applied to his student, and using it as an excuse to put a pause to that conversation, directed the rest of himself to examining Delaire as he started, wanting to be certain she'd be okay. While even the chances of giving her a headache felt low, he was about to try something he hadn't before with her and wanted to be prepared for any potential reactions, either to put a stop to what he was doing instantly if it came to it, or else even going so far as to clip the information he was going to provide from her using mind break. So, lightly touching her mind with his own, he started giving her knowledge. It was something he'd done before throughout her lessons and with numerous other people as well, but what he was now doing was on another scale entirely. The knowledge skill he used to hold was perfect for making her and anyone else memorize the information he could provide, but from all of the people he'd connected to across all walks of life, he'd found he could now transmit far deeper levels of experience, and while her physical body worked, he did exactly that, giving her not just all of the information he held on crafting but subtler details too. Apply what he knew in a way that would fit her own body as he transmitted information on how she should move and how it should feel, being rewarded with a surprise of his own as he heard the notification going off in her head saying she'd gained her 4th level to the skill, making him re-examine his plans for the day. Well, that could be interesting. Delaire, hammer down. Looks like we're changing things up for a moment, Ben said, while she'd only just started to register the notification. Sit down for just a bit. Was the level a fluke coincidence or something repeatable? He knew he had to check, and grinning brightly she did as he said as he repeated what he'd done before, giving her a higher quality of information on enchanting next, feeling the knowledge become a part of her without any notification to go with it. Okay, so maybe that didn't work, but then again. He materialized and tossed her a small pendant, the young dryad catching it out of the air. Enchant on that to the best of your ability. Something that would be useful on a pendant, but otherwise it's up to you. Okay. She focused on it as she began her work, applying her affinities to it the same way he'd apply his resistances to give the wearer an easier time with plant spells specifically, and was rewarded for it once more, her enchanting reaching the 3rd level when she did. If she'd been beaming after the first, then the next had left her almost ready to explode in excitement, and seemed to verify that he was now able to transmit information to a level of detail that he could have a reasonable chance of causing a level beyond the few one-off times. He'd managed to help people gain some in the past, if not an outright certainty of it, but he wasn't yet done. He'd just helped her level 2 skills he was excellent at. Could he do the same for one he wasn't? Instantly he was materializing a seed, some water, dirt, and a pot to hold it all before carefully handing it over. He could feel Mora's new eyes on him with interest, able to see what was happening and switching between him and Delaire, while Thera was able to pick up that something at least was happening but not seeing the finer details of it, while Ben next moved to try and reinforce her knowledge of plant magic, not having any of his own experience to draw from but instead pulling it from the memories of other, more powerful dryads he'd been connected to in the past, and tried to apply it in such a way that he knew would suit her. Hearing as she not only got her 4th level to it but completed her job as well, leaving her unable to even partially contain herself any longer and jumping for joy, Ben's actions all but unseen as he buried his face in his hands and muttered under his breath, "Oh God, this is going to create so much more work for me. Is it weird I want to cry? He asked as he laid there on the shop floor, even more testing done. Like, not to sound insane, but with the way I currently think, the majority of my mind is actually pretty emotionless now. It would have to be for me to stay sane, meaning that the part of myself that I express to the world is what gets my feelings, since that part typically keeps speeds comparable with baseline reality, but now here I am, the whole of myself in despair. Isn't that just a little strange? Ben, every time you talk about the state of your mind it sounds strange, Thera said, doing her part to comfort him despite the comment as she sat beside him, rubbing his head. But there, it's going to be okay. It's never going to be okay again. The gods are going to try to keep me as busy as the soul mages. You are technically a soul mage, you do remember that, right? Yeah, in the way someone with a doctorate in the history of cheesemaking is a doctor, everyone knows it doesn't really count. Ugh, I'm literally only one guy. After Dallaire had taken her new job, going for craftsman, further experiments had shown that, so long as he had the experiences of at least a few awakened skill holders of a given ability within his mind, he could almost instantly give a level to a Tier 1 active skill and almost certainly lower their leveling thresholds as a result, at least for the next few that would be coming after. While Dallaire's status was still somewhat short, he'd been able to help her level a couple of her other skills thanks to it, and Thera had gained levels for every Tier 1 active skill she had except for her mana examination and her spirit comprehension, with the first already being at its 9th level and only needing to awaken, and the second being one she was the first to hold. Ben having no experience there, he could give her even across all of the minds he'd invaded, which implied one overwhelming, undeniable fact. The gods were going to want him to keep doing it. He could already see it. All of them up there demanding his work for the mere pennies they'd try to provide and then acting offended that he'd want more, even as they asked him for days or even weeks of his time, with the worst part being that he couldn't justify keeping it to himself either. This was a power worthy of the 3rd tier, one that would be useful for the world as a whole too, but more than any of that, it was going to be a pain in the ass. It also meant that his own skills would likely grow even faster as well, which was of a small consolation. He'd even raised his dance level while testing Thera's own, but there were more implications that couldn't be ignored either. If he was going to be able to help others raise their skills that way, he'd likely be able to help them gain them too. It was something he hadn't tested yet, that would come after the small breakdown he was letting himself enjoy, but he was already thinking about if and how he'd apply it to himself, with the worst part of all being that he didn't think he saw anywhere he'd want to. If he could more easily gain more passive skills, then he would have taken it in a heartbeat, but active skills? Sure, in theory he had linked his mind to awakened fighters of all sorts and mages as well. He could almost certainly now learn any combat skill and at least some of the non-affinitied magics with minimal practice, but the issue was that doing so would only split his focus, and in a significant way. The author's tale has been misappropriated. Report any instances of this story on Amazon. Everything that he was going towards trying to reach the 3rd tier with Connect and refine his ideas for the tools he'd need if he was going to fight a god. Maybe throwing a few punches would now be enough for him to unlock the Zeroth level of unarmed combat, and maybe with a few hours or even a few minutes of attempts he could now gain a new magic if he really wanted to, but what would be the point? If the world wasn't collapsing around him, then he would have gone mad acquiring all he could, but more 1st-tier skills weren't going to help him kill a god, and despite all of the bonuses he held across his jobs, titles, blessings, and skills, he wasn't going to put enough effort to get any new combat or magic to the 2nd tier when he had better things to focus on. What am I supposed to do if I were to waste my time getting a bunch of vanity skills? Punch the most powerful god in reality to death. Maybe my sacrilege would be enough to make the blow hurt, maybe even do some damage, but I'm not trying to get a combat skill to its 3rd tier in the time I have left, so there's no way it would be enough. Ugh. Does the entire universe really hate me? Letting me get the coolest ability I could hope for and no freaking time to enjoy using it on myself? Is that really it? Ugh. I'll need to figure out how I'm going to tell Myriad about this, and how I'm ultimately going to arrange things to do this too, he muttered. Maybe I could combine it with all of the soul modifications I'm still scheduled to do? Anyone who comes for a modification gets their levels raised since they're at least seeking power, and anyone who doesn't want their souls modified doesn't. Oh damn it, that means I'm going to have even more people to awaken then too. If I can get the 7th levels of physical magics to the 8th, then that means I'll be able to awaken them immediately after. Oh my god. This is so much work, and it's completely irrelevant to my goals beyond the fact that it's going to help anyone I help have a better chance of living, and I guess improving the world's odds a bit too, and I want to be sick. Come on now, it's going to be okay. Thera comforted while the two kids watched Ben's breakdown from the side, neither seeing why he was taking something that seemed so good so hard. Just ask for something outrageous enough that it will keep requests down. I know you're good at that. Ugh, it doesn't matter, they won't give it to me. They'll fight tooth and nail and try to guilt me from whatever angle they can to talk me down, and then some are going to threaten me for being insolent or something stupid, and then I'm going to have to put them in their place, which is only going to make them more mad even though they're going to deserve it, and then I'm still going to break down because even if I know I'm being ripped off, I decided to not abandon this stupid planet, and I've done so freaking much for this world already. I swear if I live I'm going to force every stupid god to give me their blessing whether they want to or not. They'll see how evil the god of sacrilege can be. The what? Nothing, Delaire. I'm just whining and being a disgrace of an adult. Please ignore me while I'm being a bad influence. Ben, if she ignored you while you're being a bad influence, then she'd never be able to learn anything from you. Thera told him with a level of gentle sincerity that only hurt all of the more, forcing him to finally get up. No, okay, this is fine. And even if it's not fine, I'll work it out. I can handle having one more task on my already ridiculous schedule, and I still need to actually see if I can help teach others active skills for now, but even if I can't, there really shouldn't be too much demand on that front from the gods, right? Unless, of course, they want me trying to train any civilians in a couple skills to act as a last line of defense for themselves. He sighed before going on. No. Okay, you know what? No. A Zeroth level anything isn't going to help anyone for the third wave. I'm not doing it, so for now, we're just going to do a quick test to see if I even can do that in the first place and then move on from there. Delaire, we've spoken about it before, but are there any non-affinitied magics you'd like access to? Can you help me learn material user and destruction like you? Oh, and I know it's not magic, but can I try Connect too? Please? She asked, already excited at the prospect and instantly melting away some of Ben's despair. All right, now I kind of want to cry for nicer reasons. Yeah, I can do that, so let's do our best here. He transferred all of the things he'd learned about those 3 rare skills and the experience of using them, having no other sources to pull from for them but still trying to adjust as he did. 2 were bonus skills from Awakening and 1 came from his god, not something he'd gained himself, but he knew how it felt to use them and watched as she started to try, not getting immediate results and leaving him just the smallest amount of comfort. Okay, so it looks like this doesn't leave skill acquisition as easy as it does leveling. Of course, the difference could be a matter of minutes, but still, just gotta watch and see. With attempts for it all ending with mixed results, both magics working out to about an hour for proper acquisition of the 2 skills she'd had no experience in. Leagues better than the weeks or even months it might normally take to gain a non-affinity magic, but still long enough that further showed it wasn't worth wasting his time on, even if Connect hadn't gone so smoothly. So she didn't get Connect for herself in the end, which means there might be some limits I'm not immediately seeing. The fact that I don't know how anyone would acquire that to begin with might be part of the problem, but it shows that I can't just teach any skill I've seen. There's going to be exceptions. Still, I'll reserve some leisurely skill acquisition for the future if I'm not brutally murdered in the next few months, which as a fun bonus means I'll mostly just need to buy passive skills from Zandale when the war ends too, so hey, that's a positive, right? A minor positive compared to how much work he was still expecting it to be, but a positive nonetheless as he did his best to manage his feelings for what was left of the remaining day, being forced to put a pause to it not more than a second later. Ben, what's going on here? Definitely nothing the gods are going to try to financially abuse me over. Why, what's up? All right, fine, give me a real answer later. Arrangements have been made for the 2/3 tiers you'll be helping. They'll be ready for you in an hour. Okay, great. With the shape of his current thoughts, he didn't know if he could experience true distraction, but at the very least it would be one new thing to occupy him, lightening his load just a little bit with something new to look forward to. With Thera leaving to give a bit of help at the hospital for what time remained in the day, Ben turned to Delaire and Mora once he needed to leave himself, grabbing both their attention away from their cleaning. All right, I'm going to need to step out for a bit, so Delaire, head on home for the day. Mora, you okay to walk her back and I'll come pick you up later? I will. Thanks, kiddo. Hopefully I won't be too long, but both of you keep safe on your way. We will, Delaire called back, already tugging Mora along in excitement and curiosity at how the rest of her village was going to react to the boy's sudden change. Letting a small smile creep onto Ben's face despite the stress of the day as he was left alone, the only thing left to do being to pass through the gate to all who waited beyond. With the guild, on the other side, being even busier than usual. Not that that was the most shocking considering he was helping twice the number of people finish their jobs and many of the parties he'd be working with would only be with him for whatever remaining levels they had before he'd need to move on to the next to help. It wasn't like every member of every party would show up when only the one with the adventurer's job was needed, but while he could see a few individuals there without whoever they were linked to, plenty more seemed to want to be present, either for the conveniently available job crystal the guild held or else to see him personally, the one going around and seeming to be blessing the world with experience. Well, whatever anyone else wants to do is their business. More important is that it looks like both third tiers decided to come in person this time. One of whom looked far different than the last time Ben had seen him. On his previous encounter with the true shifter, the third tier had been purely aquatic, having both fins and gills, but that was no longer so. While he was displaying some more aggressive traits, sharp claws and fangs along with a thick, protective layer of skin and muscle, as if he was trying to be prepared for a fight then and there, his appearance was entirely adapted to the surface, looking right at home. And as for the other, she hadn't appeared to have noticed him yet, too locked on to the person whose party it seemed she joined, being oblivious to how badly they looked like they'd wanted to leave her intense yet eyeless gaze, was able, the arrangement of all the parties telling him she would be the last he'd be helping. Which does leave the question of why her next. There's a few other native third tiers who should have way better odds of either getting an advanced third tier job or maybe even a level, but I guess it could be as simple as they weren't planning on trying to do anything back-to-back like this and she happened to be free. And whatever, it doesn't matter. Let's just get to work. With his first group waiting, he went over and joined it, accepting the invitation of the party leader at the same time he touched his job crystal. The first time he'd let himself since finishing his last to avoid temptation and letting him see all of the new options as they flooded his mind. Available jobs. Trap user. Craftsman alchemy path. Craftsman artistic path. Craftsman blacksmith path. Craftsman cooking path. Craftsman stonecrafts path. Craftsman sewing path. A mathematician. A high marksman. A high destruction mage. Beginner puppeteer. Outsider. Assassin. Cycler. A beginner dancer.
Entrée.
Soul creator. A god-defiling gardener. Master actualizer. A body master. A master tank. Eldritch mind user. A king of mana. King of stamina. A mind breaker. Primordial heretic. Intelligence embodiment. King of vitality. Therapist. Just when I was starting to make a dent in it, they give me 10 more. He thought to himself, feeling a grin stretch across his face as he did for all of the new ones he'd gained, a few of which he'd either known or suspected he'd gain access to. The 3 new king jobs were no shock given how straightforward the rules of unlocking them were, and both Body Master and Master Tank had each been heavily suspected for the awakenings he'd claimed at the end of Craftsman's Tower. Intelligence embodiment had been suspected too based on Thera's jobs, but less certain. Ben hadn't known for sure how high the threshold for it was going to be, but given king and queen jobs required 10,000 points of an attribute, he was willing to guess 100,000 was one of the more likely answers, leaving only 4 others to look over. He'd of course known that he'd be gaining jobs for his third-tier skills, with Eldritch Mind User and Primordial Heretic standing out instantly for all of the curiosity each held. Given the long line of sacrilege jobs he'd taken to that point, he had no doubt that the bonuses it would give would be incredible, even if he could assume little in the way of any potential levels and skills, but as for the other, it itself presented a rather unfortunate problem. He didn't believe he'd be able to speed through it, at least not to the scale he would for others. A mind user had been a vital part of every party he'd been a part of for the experience his thought structure could create based on that job's requirements, but the one he'd unlocked had to be specialized for his mind, making it far harder to cheat in the end if it were one he was going to take. Of course, hard but not significantly. Before, I'd been avoiding the job soul creator because making souls had been my main experience producer for doing this, and with that job specialized for it, it wasn't going to get much either, but now, I could use a mind user to finish it almost instantly for the bonuses and hopefully levels it would give to Soul Source, and any growth to that would make finishing however hard Eldritch Mind is going to be so much easier. Plus, with all of the mana I now have, I was already going to be way faster at it anyway, and even if that didn't work for some reason, well, I've still got my Heretic strat. There's a lot of ways to make it work, just maybe not this time. While it did seem like it would give him some connect bonuses too, since it was thoroughly a mind job, it wasn't going to be the priority for that day, being left to wait for perhaps the next. And seeing the last two, I'm going to bet they're related. Mindbreaker was obvious. Drawn for the bonus skill awakening his mind had left him, and Therapist was almost certainly tied to his use of it. While the results hadn't been as good as he'd wanted, he had been directly using the skill to try and help his fellow prisoners break free of the damage their long confinement had inflicted upon them, making for a tempting option for the future should he ever want to try and improve the results he'd already gotten. But with the options I've currently got, oh what the heck, I'd been planning on taking Master Actualizer in this run anyway. I might as well clear out all of my master jobs in general. Give me Body Master. Flavor Enhancement. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw both Abel and the True Shifter perking up when he gained that particular level. Whatever had changed in him enough for their sharp senses to both notice any improvement in scent that might also translate to taste, with at least the less cannibalistic of the two, having the decency to look embarrassed at what had prompted the reaction instead of blatantly hungry. A fact that he hoped the girl wasn't going to be too aggressive about by the time he got to her. Ugh. I guess I can give her some blood if she asks. I can't help but be a little curious about how I'm going to affect her attributes now that I'm a double third tier and have my divine body skill too, but God, where's my survival instinct? Why am I so willing to enable someone who wants to get a bite out of me? No matter how far his curiosity had gotten him in life, the fact he knew he was willing to pour someone a glass of his own blood to see how it had changed really emphasized the drawbacks of having too much, but he did his best to ignore that as he went through different parties. Moving on to the next group as the completion notification went off in his head. Touching his crystal once more and see what new options had been left from finishing the one master job. Regarding them with interest but still ignoring them for what he'd claim next. Master Tank. Alright, slowly but surely becoming harder to kill. Big fan of that, so let's see what's next. He worked his way through parties from there, helping them finish one by one while he gained his own experience before finishing his job and arriving at the midpoint of that run where the True Shifter Faust gave him a tired look that slowly gained some energy as it turned into a grin. Love what you're reading? Discover and support the author on the platform they originally published on. The Soulsmith's boy, right? So you're the one doing all of this? Yeah. I've always had a talent for gaining experience. Ha, if you're really going to finish the job I've been stuck on for decades in a day, then calling it a simple talent isn't going to cut it. If Rook ever reappears, I wonder if he'll at least feel a bit embarrassed about causing a scene over you before. Doesn't matter. The deal with the gods for my work is that he doesn't get my services. Ha, another reason for him to regret then. I can't imagine how long he's been stuck on his job, but it might measure in the centuries. That ass has always been a lazy one, at least as long as I've known him. Well, who knows, maybe being away from everything for a while will be good for him. Ben shrugged, his thoughts briefly turning to the immortal he trapped in an item and dropped to the bottom of the ocean before deciding that he ultimately didn't care. For now, though, let's see if I really can get you done as fast as I'm hoping. I can already feel Abel's eyes burrowing into me while she waits for her turn. It looks more like she wants a bite of you than she cares about finishing her job. Yeah, I can see that. Hungry or not though, she'd have to wait. Ben had his own thoughts on what he was seeing from the shifter, that third tier having grown considerably since Ben had last seen him, but while he was curious, it didn't really matter in the face of what was coming next. This was the big test for him, one he'd thought of shortly after his awakenings and only needed to be confirmed, with all of the tools he'd need for it in hand. All that was to see if he'd really generate as much experience as he was expecting, and with that he made his choice, speaking it out clearly within the confines of his mind where no nosy god could overhear. Give me Primordial Heretic. The parts of Ben still within his realm all got to see as it expanded before their eyes, giving them more space to build and work with as they practiced their actualizing, but that wasn't the notification that mattered to him in any way. No, what mattered was that he'd in essence managed to prove what he'd been saying to the gods. Time was relative, and the way he could think meant that he'd be able to keep growing his sacrilege even further. He was still connected to Quox. The god soul still pressed against Ben's flesh on the band he wore, and he'd still been using him for all he was worth, trying to claim as much experience from the deity as he could while the god who'd helped doom the world could only suffer through it. Sometimes trying to fight back but usually screaming, either about the unjustness of the acts against him or even for mercy, trying to convince Ben he was worthy of it, but all of that was only if he could articulate words at all in the midst of what he was being put through. A being that was once so high now powerless in the hands of the evil god who held him. And it hadn't even been a day, not in the physical world at least. The millennia of torment within his mind where those acts were taking place though had been taking their toll on the other in a way that still couldn't help perplex Ben. For all he'd put the god through, it couldn't help but feel unreasonably slow when looking at it from the time they were existing at, leaving him with one inescapable truth. Torturing a soul is inefficient, he thought with a sigh. I mean, for me, there's really nothing that could be more efficient when only looking at the results I've gotten in the physical world, but still, for a third-tier skill, it seems like what I'm doing is only giving me a trickle, and with no real way to test if certain acts I'm doing are giving me more experience than others. There's nothing I can do but keep up at it. The level came with another problem too, namely the fact that anyone who could see his soul, the two soul mages, Falk Verbum, and Nadi and Zilly both, if they used Connect on him, would all be able to tell that he'd gained a third-tier level in an impossible amount of time. A fact that was sure to stick in all of their minds for long enough that, even if the gods weren't watching when it was first noticed, would be sure to be discovered. Except none of that even actually matters because I'm living with the great soul spirit who can do the same, and I'm sure that plenty of regular soul spirits are going to make their way into our home too. Okay, doesn't matter, that's a future problem. Focus on finishing this. He may have taken a third-tier job, but he'd come prepared, not just utilizing the new shape of his mind and not just materializing souls, but using the god he was connected to, every bit of pain and anguish he inflicted translating to experience to see if all of that together would be enough. Getting his confirmation only a moment later. While he himself was satisfied, happy to have gotten the result he'd expected, Faust was incomparably so. His eyes alight as he lifted Ben by the shoulders and spun around, giving a cheer as he did. Soulsmith's boy, I had my doubts, but you really did it. He laughed as he set Ben down, earlier signs of exhaustion gone. This changes everything. Oh, I haven't felt the joy of taking a new job in ages. I can't wait. Be my guest, Ben said, handing over his personal crystal while the shifter shook in his excitement. Going over all of the options he held while Ben appraised the man once more, still not sure of the changes he was seeing. When he'd first met the man, or at least been in the same room as him, Ben had looked at his and everyone else's souls and found him to be unusually skilled even by the standards of those who shared his rank, holding a few hundred of first tiers at varying levels that at the time, he'd ignored beyond what he could put on rings, content to chalk it up to the effects of a long life but could assume that no longer. Most of them had grown, many even by multiple levels, and he had dozens more already in the few months that had passed, raising the inescapable question of how. A question he was able to form theories on easily enough as he looked, which he decided to confirm, searching the other's mind for answers and finding them, with it all coming down to the nature of his skill. The way he'd shapeshift was tied to what it had grown from, the beast form skill he'd originally had getting stronger and stronger, merging with not only life magic but surprisingly space as well, along with a few other skills before it had reached its current height, which granted it its key ability, absorbing the souls of the things he killed, with the added side effect being that it seemed to give him the skills of the beasts he'd absorbed. Before the war, that had meant simple animals that hadn't even been system integrated, but now he was taking in demons in droves, with all of them having real work put into their growth, making their power Faust's own as well. It seemed obvious too, but when Ben had simply looked before, he'd missed it for one main reason. The shifter was lacking the skills that would have been the biggest giveaway. The third tier before him didn't hold any sort of soul magic, the defining skill of the demons, but the answer to that existed within the other's memories as well, with certain skills he'd claim merging into others, with his third-tier skill being, in essence, a pit for the magics that had already gone into it, as well as both death and any soul variant. Anytime he'd kill a beast that had any of those, he'd get a notification telling him what skills he'd gain and how they'd merge, meaning everything he killed was a direct act to become even more powerful. which can't help but make me wonder what would happen if he kills a god. The question wiggling its way into Ben's mind.
Instant divinity?
Maybe even the ability to gather and use faith while still mortal. Man, not only would that be insanely cool and overpowered, it might even allow for the creation or discovery of entirely new types of skills. Really, it was an ability so powerful that it couldn't help but raise more and more questions for him as Ben secretly took the man apart, examining the last 2 years of his life in the background before letting himself focus more on the world around him too beyond his curiosity. Getting to watch as the shifter selected the one advanced third-tier job he'd been given, with the notifications instantly having him slapping Ben's back. "Ha, and let's just say things went as good as they could have," he said in naked excitement, Faust's own mind in a frenzy for what had just happened that he was trying to contain. Becoming the first third-tier Ben had helped who'd gained a level to their core skill. So finally a success. Huh? Good for him. It was doubtless that all of the demon souls he'd been absorbing and the way they'd been merging into his own had helped him, but Ben didn't doubt the shifter had deserved it, despite a few more worrying things among his mind that had been seen in Ben's search for answers. It was plain that he was using his power to the best of his ability to protect land and sea alike. Any growth to someone like that would be a benefit. "Well, I'm glad it went well for you," Ben said, acting as though he hadn't just examined every moment since the waves had started of the man's existence to satisfy his own curiosity. "I've got to move on too though, so if you don't mind." He held out his hand for his job crystal back, the other returning it without a thought, too occupied with the success he'd gotten to spare much mind for anything else and switching to staring at his card in glee, leaving Ben to move on, joining his next party. Which means next is gonna be God-defiling gardener. Okay, worst one so far. Not a single level. No awakenings or new skills either. Lame. 2 left though, with his second last choice waiting for him. He'd planned on taking every master job and he'd meant it, leaving only one more to go. Master Actualizer. A skill that's going to make it easier for me to actualize in the mortal realm? Gonna need to test to see if that will reduce the mana cost even more when I pair it with materialization, but I will absolutely take that. And now for last. "Hey, number 2, Abel said as he walked over, finally freeing her unwilling conversation partner. "You smell like you've gotten a lot stronger, even compared to when you first walked in here." "Just a bit," Ben told her lightly. "I've been keeping productive." "Have you been though, Abel?" "Doing well. Of course, every day's a blast and there's always new friends to be made too," she laughed, slapping the adventurer she was with on the arm while Ben took note of them flinching. The girl's spooky look and bright attitude creating an unnerving contrast for anyone not used to her. "And so I hear you're gonna work your way through my job? Seeing as how you got that old perv done so fast, I guess there's some truth to it." "Ah, well, I'm not sure if it will be exactly as fast as it was for him, but it'll still be nothing in comparison to however you're currently getting through it." Sounds good, sounds good. I had more from the start I've wanted to take. Lot of different skills to raise and things to try out, so join up already." Yeah, can do." Under Abel's prompting, the adventurer extended the invitation to their party, which Ben accepted, merging their experience pools and leaving him to take his final choice of that run, with the one he was looking at feeling inescapable despite the worries he held for it. He'd been putting off selecting Outsider for a while now, despite feeling confident that it would be powerful based off of both his own experience with one as well as what he'd seen when he'd probed Abel's memories in the past. It was a job with effects he couldn't guess at, and given a few of the experiences he'd had taking mysterious jobs in the past, it couldn't help but make him worry. Really, it was one he would have preferred to put off longer too, more than willing to make more excuses if not for one glaring fact. He'd have Abel in his party. If it really was going to be a third-tier job, then having a person who was literally part outsider giving it experience would only help. Odds may have been good that the shape of his mind and ability to create souls would be more than enough for the experience for it that he'd need, but since he likely wouldn't be able to take advantage of his latest cheat of torturing a god for centuries of experience, he was trying to be prepared for the eventuality that it could take up to a day or two to get both his and Abel's jobs done together. Far from the longest of times, but if her presence could shorten it even a little, then he'd happily take it. Accepting his choice and adding a new point to his status, he already hoped the gods wouldn't notice as he thought it out, feeling all of the changes that came with it. Outsider. The choice made, and undeniably a third-tier job for the bonuses he'd received, but he wasn't given the leeway to process all that had come with it. With the job had come what he'd feared. A new change in himself as the nerves in his body lit up in an experience he wasn't even sure qualified as pain, and the memory of peering into the chaos filled the totality of his mind, all while his divine heart was left pounding in his chest as he fell to the ground. He'd thought he'd gotten over the effects of staring into the chaos. It hadn't stopped scratching at the walls of his mind since he'd first caught a glimpse, but he'd been long past reacting to it. No bouts of sickness or headaches until then, and while he hadn't tested it, the new shape of his mind seemed like it should have eradicated the problem entirely. A mental structure that went beyond even that held by any god of the world should have been immune to anything no matter how strange, but as he laid there, clutching at his chest as his heart pounded, everything he was went back to the chaos. Not something a being born to a universe was meant to see. The space between realities felt unnatural, holding no true rules to give it stability, yet was home to the unspeakable things that lived there, but as something that wasn't one himself, it was more like he'd been contaminated by that brief exposure, and with no part of him free of it, all he could do was wait for the feeling to pass, which started with his mind before his body. He didn't know if his thought speed had changed at all during it, but he did know that the totality of himself had dropped back to match real time once the memory had begun to fade, letting him regain a broader awareness of how fast his heart was pumping in his chest, along with the unnatural feeling throughout both his flesh and deeper still, prickling senses he didn't think he held as something in him changed. But through that, something else. Hands on his body and a feeling of magic as his eyes slowly came into focus. Something pouring down his throat too as he finally took note of the crowd around him. The shifter touching his chest to provide what healing he could, and Abel holding his head. A cut in her wrist that looked bit open, pouring gray blood into his mouth as they spoke above him. "Damn it, you little weirdo. Don't tell me you did something?" Faust asked as he focused on healing Ben, fighting through his resistances while trying to figure out just what was wrong, while Abel tried to defend herself. "Why would I have done anything? He's a buddy." "Yeah, and I know you're happy to take a bite out of anyone no matter if they're your buddy or not. And I'm telling you, you stupid old pervert, it looked like he was just taking a job and then did that." "Yeah. Well, taking jobs doesn't hurt people, so something must have happened. God, I wish it was true that taking jobs didn't hurt people. How am I both the first example of it happening and the one it keeps happening to? I'd like to lodge a complaint. I'm telling you, this wasn't me." "Ugh. She's right, it wasn't." Ben finally spoke as he forced himself to sit up. "And minor clarification, in rare cases, taking a job actually can hurt you, and I just took one that nobody else has gotten before, so I guess I got a bad pull." "Wait, are you being serious?" Faust asked, sounding in disbelief as Ben clarified. "Extremely, extremely rare cases. Only a couple examples I'm aware of it happening. And every one of them was in me. Damn it. Ahem. Thanks for the help though, I think I'm good now." As the feelings he was under faded and his pulse finally started to slow, he actually found himself feeling significantly more powerful, left wondering if whatever had happened to him had affected his attributes too as he went to rub his face and froze partway through. Among other things, Ben could see souls, and since part of their nature was that they filled whatever vessel they were in, he had some experience seeing his own when he'd looked down at himself, and the sight of his hands made him freeze for the change he saw in his. It looked deeper, thicker, like it was of more substance, while minor structures it held had changed with it in a way he hadn't seen in mortals or gods alike, and left one inescapable question on his mind. What did my witness blessings growth do to me? It was a change he hadn't expected, growing from witness of chaos to child of chaos, but what that meant remained a mystery beyond the fact that the change ran deep and at the high speeds he could think. He ran a few quick tests to look for side effects. He already knew that the blessing had been changing him before it had grown, slowly adapting him to the chaos in a way that mercifully hadn't seemed to be warping him into some unholy monstrosity, but with how it had changed it was impossible to say. He didn't seem any different when it came to making souls nor condemning them, and while he could feel the shift in how he perceived the world, he was willing to chalk that up to the new sense skill he'd gained that he'd look into deeper later. No, as he ran through the abilities he held, trying to see if they were at all affected, there was only one that he found altered for whatever had happened to him. One of the effects of deep connection had grown. Before, every level of the skill had translated to roughly a meter's distance when stretching out his soul, placing him at 10 now that he was at his 9th level when he'd last done it, but extending it beyond now with the change, his range feeling closer to 15. An undeniable boon to be sure, but one with a cost he wasn't sure he could handle. The narrative has been stolen. If detected on Amazon, report the infringement. Child of Chaos. If he was the witness of it before, then had he just become the child? But if so, what did that mean? He needed to do at least a few more tests, and with the world frozen around him, he didn't hold back, forcing himself to dive into what he'd just been bound by, making his mind go back into his memories of the chaos to see what effect it would hold. And finding nothing. No longer scratching at his mind, no longer nauseating him, and no longer seeming to be a problem in any way. He didn't have any issues when it came to remembering the hole in reality he'd seen, nor the beast that had come from it. As far as he could tell, despite how violent it had felt getting there, he was fine. So does that mean that maybe the effects of the chaos in general have weakened for me even more? He wondered, with no way to test. It wasn't like he could go and open a hole in reality to check. Nor would he want to. He hadn't forgotten what Quillith had told him about some of the Grey's experiments, and while it sounded like all of the worst effects came from anything that had actually been pushed through a reality, that was a level of risk simply not worth taking, and he let a part of himself drop back down to base speeds to interact with the people frozen around him. Well, good, because I had no clue what the hell was wrong with you. Faust went on, blind to all of the tests and reflections Ben had gone through. Your body seemed fine, but, well, even if it's strong for being part of a third-tier skill, I haven't really bothered training my life magic much since I was at the first. You should make some time to see a proper healer. Luckily I live with a few, so I'll get them to check me out later. For now though, thanks for the help. Seeing that he no longer looked in danger, the crowd slowly started to disperse, leaving him with the 2/3 tiers by the end, with Abel offering her hand. Thanks for the help. I appreciate it, he said, giving it a shake while she tried to not be so obvious in her disappointment. No, I let you eat me. I want you to return the favor. Yeah. I was kind of ignoring it, but why did you just bleed in me? Meat strengthening works both ways. You'll have a few more points in your attributes now, and you might be a bit buffed on top of that for a bit, but more importantly, it's got some healing effects too. Now, I was super generous and gave you my blood. You could at least return the favor. Okay. Out of curiosity, how much should any of my attributes have grown? He hadn't checked his card that morning, so he couldn't do the math himself to be sure, but instead of answering, Abel just kept waving her empty hand, leaving Ben to sigh. Yeah, okay, I'll give you my blood on 2 conditions. You tell me how much my attributes should have grown, and you tell me how much yours'll grow from me. I've gotten stronger. I want to know if there's any improvement. You're a god now, of course there'll be improvement, she said casually, perking Faust up with that reveal. Congrats, by the way. You really are worthy of being number 2. How did you know that? You smell like a 3rd tier now. Yeah. Okay, thanks. What else could he say? He already knew she held some unique senses in the way they detect minds and souls. The fact that she'd found out wasn't a shock, even if having it immediately outed to another 3rd tier was a bit annoying, but with that reveal given and nothing else to say, he materialized a cup and a knife, using the second to fill the first with blood as he nicked himself and squeezed some out, turning to Faust to get his wound closed before trading it for the other summons card, quickly scanning over the details. Wow, you're a lot more powerful than last time, he said, seeing that her already high attributes had grown by a few hundred. Keeping well fed? You think the world's got any other choice? She laughed as she downed the glass. And you got to benefit because the bit I gave you should be giving you 5s across the board. Consider yourself lucky. Neat. I wonder if Defiler of Ambrosia will strengthen that effect? He wasn't positive how much more he'd given her than he'd gotten since he hadn't been completely cognizant at the time, but he was willing to bet it was a difference of 4 or 5 times. Meaning that if it scaled with volume, she could have given him up to 25 points in everything if she'd matched him. Not that he cared too much about that. It would be a lot, and it would be easy attributes, but he was happy to take what he could get, focusing instead on how she herself would change with his blood, unable to help but worry about how much more she was going to want when she found out. And it looks like from what I just gave you, it's 20 for everything except intelligence. That's 100. No kidding, she laughed, positively glowing with the answer. I think that puts you at the best of the third tiers I've tried. You really have gotten stronger, but… Wait. Everything. He saw a worrying gleam in her expression as she snatched back her card before focusing back on him. Ben trying his best to look firm. I'm not giving you more. Please? Pretty please? You don't know how rare this is, and you've just given me the best by far. How can you just do that and tell me no now? Really easily. I know it raised your weeping, but I need my blood to live. The unique attribute she held that seemed to come from the peace of the dead god of her old reality still bound to her soul. Ben knew its immense value as one that could be used to grow her own skills, but even though he had his own interest in that power, he wasn't looking to be devoured for it no matter how hopeful she looked. But aren't we pals? Aren't we friends? We are, he said, lighting her up like he'd never seen before. But I still don't want to get eaten. Besides, wait. With all that had happened, he'd let himself get distracted, but the moment he noticed, he ripped out his own card, unable to escape what was wrong. His mind was now working perfectly, and he was making souls like he needed to the maximum of his ability, but no notifications went off in his head. His job level was still 0. Oh, come on. There were a few possibilities for why it wasn't already growing, but one stood out to him stronger than any other and left him wanting to bury his head in his hands, with either his or Abel's job requiring far more experience for its tier than he'd ever seen before. Okay, it was nice seeing you guys, but it looks like I actually need to go test something real quick, Ben said as he jumped up and started rushing away, back to the guildmaster's office where he kept his personal gate and only stopped as he reached the door, looking behind him as he did. Did you two need something else? Or is there some other reason you're following me? Both Abel and Faust looked at one another before shrugging, the other summoned speaking first. Come on, even if you won't let me have another bite. It's been a while. I want to hang out. And I actually have a real reason, the shifter said. The few times I've seen him, your teacher sings your praise, so I was hoping to see if you'd be possible to commission for a, well, admittedly difficult piece. Ooh, I'd commission you too if you'd be down to play a bit, Abel said as she jumped. Come on, just a spar or 2 or 12? Okay, not 12, but fine, I guess. Can I meet you both tomorrow to discuss it? I'm on a bit of a tight timeline, the shifter told him. I don't mind if we start tomorrow, but I'd rather have the conversation tonight. And I don't want you to try and escape, Abel added, both leaving Ben to sigh. Okay, fine. Come on and just try not to be too surprised. They're going to start spreading soon, but they aren't exactly on the market yet. Letting himself in, he walked up to his mini-gate and activated it, watching as both of them reacted to its presence, with Faust seeming more shocked than anything, while Abel displayed nothing but plain excitement. So you were important enough to get your hands on one of these then? The shifter said, having some experience with them from the second wave, used to connect invasion points for some of the more powerful of the world to fight, same as Thera had dealt with. I suppose it makes sense. Someone able to help finish jobs like that's going to be a treasure. Well, thank you, and I am, but I'm also the guy who made these. You'll probably start seeing more of them soon once my factory starts picking up, but either way, come on and take a seat. The sooner we get this over with, the sooner I can pick up my kid and turn in. You already have a kid? Abel asked him in surprise. Pretty crap timing to be doing that, don't you think? He's adopted. Anyway, come on and take your seats. He pulled out some chairs at the same time he slipped on his jacket, overfilling his soul to the tremendous new volume he could after his awakenings, and instantly began the process of converting all of that mana into new souls for the experience, casting glances at his card while he did as the constant process was repeated but motioned them to go on, with Faust speaking first. What I'm looking for is armor, the shifter told him, instantly catching Ben's interest. So not a weapon then? I am the weapon. Fair, okay, and seeing as how you aren't going to some well-renowned smith or even my teacher, you must be looking for something a little special. Armor for a shapeshifter? Something that will change with you. Ha, the soulsmith said you were clever. Yes, when everything about me can change on the fly, it can make being outfitted a bit of a challenge. If you spot this story on Amazon, know that it has been stolen. Report the violation. But don't you heal super easily? Can't you shapeshift away your injuries? Done your research on me, have you? I just pick things up here and there? Ben evaded, acting like he hadn't already torn through entire swaths of the other man's memories while Faust nodded. Well, you're right, but you're ignoring one major thing. No matter how well I'm able to heal myself with my power, it still hurts every time. Just because it won't kill me doesn't mean it's not something to try and manage if I can, but alas, to this day, none have been up to the challenge. And what a challenge it would be. Ben could already feel himself going over the problem. He'd need to confirm the full scope of Faust's shapeshifting, but he knew how great a range that was, from insects to Leviathan. Making something that could cover all of that felt practically impossible, but he instantly wanted to try for the challenge it presented, with Abel jumping up with the answer. Oh, me too, she said. Getting stabbed too much kind of sucks, so having a better option than just taking it would be great. Yeah, I guess she's kind of a shapeshifter too, even if she has a lot less options. I guess that making her an armor would be a good starting point for making Faust his. Okay, sure. Commissions accepted. Since you're both third tiers, I'm sure neither of you are low on funds, but we can discuss payment tomorrow. For now, I'll let you guys back through, and then if you want to meet me at the guild again in, let's say 10 hours, I'll let you both through and we can work out some of the finer details. Okay. I was just going to stay in town if it's all the same, the shifter said. Like I said, I'm on a bit of a tight timeline. If it's not done in it, well, that's really to be expected, but I am allowed hope before I go off for an expedition. Ah, your hunt in a week? Ben asked, being regarded by the shifter through narrowed eyes. Why do you know that? Because he's a peeker, Abel chimed in, being waved off by Ben as he made up a lie on the spot. Because I'm the one who discovered the presence of stronger demons on the world, and I'm both an apostle and a third tier now, it's easy to stay informed. So you really are one then? He muttered. Mind if I ask what for? My mind skills. Suppose that's why the little girl got so many to that attribute from eating you. The name? Eldritch Mind. Sounds spooky. Yeah, I have a long history of issues with how the system goes about naming my mind skills when they awaken. I'm on the fence if it's currently more or less offensive than it used to be, but I'm leaning to just barely less. Oh? What did it grow from? Unnatural mind. Ha, currently it's far better. The name gives a better feeling of power worthy of a third tier, he mused. I suppose if there's ever going to be another meeting where you'll be properly introduced, then you'd be the Eldritch Mind holder. Not bad as far as titles go. Was I supposed to get a title for awakening it? Oh no, but when word spreads about it among the masses, then you'll probably get one, and it's for the best to try and make sure it's directly related to your skill. Helps make sure the bonuses are related. Huh, good to know. Then Abel, I'll let you back through in the morning dash. I'll stay too, she yelled out. I came to hang, not to be sent off. Okay. But I don't really have room to host you. It's not even my home in the first place. I rent. What? Is this place so small it doesn't even have an inn? All right, fair. In that case, I guess I can send you two to a good one, he said, materializing 2 maps that would direct them to the one he'd stayed at when he'd first moved to Stonewall from where they were in the shop. Just head on that way, but now I really need a bit of time to myself to finish some things up. Boo! I'll make sure you actually play with me tomorrow then, Abel called out as she and Faust walked off, Ben calling back as they did. You hired me to work. I need to get that done first. With them gone though and a bit of peace regained, he was rewarded with just a little time. Thera was still off giving just a bit of help at the hospital, and Mora was with Delaire and her mother. He'd be safe while Ben took some time to continue on with his soul production, staring at his card and waiting for the level on it to finally tick up. To some of his greatest surprise that day, Mora was asleep when he went to pick him up. The body the boy had made needing rest that had trapped his true self in its thrall, while Fontesh did her best to keep her daughter from poking and prodding at him as Ben scooped him up and carried him home, left to reflect on his thoughts as he went. It had only taken 10 minutes of soul production to get that job level, but each one was harder than the last. He was going to need to keep at it constantly and really strain his soul if he wanted the maximum results for it, even as he wondered just whose job was acting as such a resource sink. Was Outsider really so extreme? He could certainly believe it would be difficult to raise, and even with what he was seeing it didn't seem like it would be remotely as hard as World Killer had been, but as things were it was still going to take him days to complete. And if it's Abel's job, then I need to be prepared for some other third tier's job to slow me down in the future. Ugh, which means that I can't even use this as a good way of judging how much experience my current mental structure gives me. Actually, my mind should be generating third-tier levels of experience. Can I actually be certain that this isn't taking the same amount as World Killer right now? God, it better freaking not be when it's not giving me the same scale of attributes.f. R ewe/nav/ll.com. Just the idea felt annoying, but he tried to suppress it. He knew he could get through it, even if it would be longer than he'd like, and more importantly, he had other things to think about. Beyond the change to his blessing and by all accounts becoming the child of chaos, he'd gained 2 new skills for it and 1 new bonus as well. While he'd seen the multiversal bonuses that Outsider had granted him before when he'd taken Multiversal Material Mage, bonuses to Outsider skills were completely new. Especially because what's the difference? I may still not be certain about what multiversal skills even are, but aren't Outsiders a part of the multiverse, or is the system counting the space between as something different? Or maybe this is an all squares are rectangles but not all rectangles are squares type of thing. Multiversal skills cover everything and Outsider skills cover the space between universes specifically? If that was the case, then that would mean the one job is letting any Outsider skills I have double dip, which would be cool if I actually had any. The only one that might have qualified was Rule Bender, but considering there was only a single rule he really knew how to bend, he wasn't holding his breath, though he did now have 1 more that might count for one of those bonuses purely on a technicality. Multiversal Inclination should be getting my multiversal bonuses, but then we circle back to the issue that I have no clue what skills that inclination should help grow, and ugh. I just want to consult Verbum, but if any god up there notices that I've already raised Evil God of Sacrilege through him, then it's going to be a huge pain in the ass. If I can distract Mora after he sees it, then there's a good chance he won't be thinking about it for weeks. Verbum might have no such luck. Which reminds me, I really should do some testing before Mora wakes up. Myriad? What? Need your attention briefly. Gonna test if you can detect people around me I'm trying to block off, so just let me know if it looks like anyone around me disappears. Trying to not extend the effects to himself, Ben directed his sacrilege to Mora and also the few people walking in his direction, doing his best to cover 5 different ones at varying ranges and waiting only for an answer that his god was quick to give. Well, Mora just vanished from your arms, it looked like, along with 5 people around you? And I need to say, I really don't like this skill. Yeah, you're gonna like it even less when we talk later then. Ugh. His god's worries were of no matter, what did was his success. He could block the sight of the gods from not only himself but also the people he wanted, ensuring just a little privacy and with any luck, a delay in how long it would take them to notice the levels he'd gained and would continue to gain to some of his more problematic skills. Which means I am going to have to keep this up basically any time I'm around Mora, but that's fine. It's just extra practice. Alright, what happened today then? Myriad asked him, sounding in despair. I can tell there's something so out with it already. Before that, weren't you guys going to try and get me some more gods I could connect to? What's going on with that? We'll have a few coming through later, and if any are late you can just pop up during the day. Now tell me already, you little nightmare. What happened? Did you just try to give me Little Nightmare as a title? No, but if you'd gained it, it would have been completely appropriate. Now stop avoiding the question. Ugh, okay fine. What do you guys want first? The news that's going to make the other gods want to kill me, or the news that's going to make them want to enslave me? I change my mind. I don't want either. Tell us the news that's going to bother the rest. Hellori sighed. Considering how a few already feel about you, how bad could it be? I leveled Evil God of Sacrilege. Hellori froze at the statement, left blinking while Myriad let out a pained whine before the goddess went on. Oh, so you really did it. Alright, that's going to be pretty bad. Exceptionally bad. Myriad groaned. I knew you were trying to do it, you stupid bastard of an apostle. And I even believed you would. But 2 days. Only 2 damnable days since you awakened that skill, and caused such a fuss, and you've already managed it. I mean, it actually took longer than I was expecting, and I'd needed my new sacrilege job to push it over the edge. But yeah, even if it's taking millennia in my head, It looks like I can manage this. I hate you. You and all you stand for. Mean thing to say to your strongest, most productive believer. My most stressful, psychotic believer. Ugh, can you at least keep it hidden for a month? Just 1 month, that's all I ask, so that when word does get out it looks marginally less terrible than it really is. Well, when more is around me I'm going to be blocking him from any watching gods, so as long as nobody peeks into his head when he happens to be thinking about it then we'll be fine. But Myriad, delaying the reveal won't make things better. Of course it won't. That's still a level in a single month, but it's better than a couple of days. Support the author by searching for the original publication of this novel. I more meant because within a month's time I'll have another level too. Maybe even more if I can help it. Hellori, I'm done, Myriad said, sounding on the verge of tears. I don't have the energy to convince the rest of the gods to not throw him into hell when he so clearly wants every one of them to try. Myriad, buddy, look at it this way. No mortal's gotten past the first level of a third-tier skill before, right? I'm not about to be swayed by how oh so impressive it would be for you to do it, Ben. Not the point. If I get to, let's say, even the third level, what are they going to be able to do to me? Like, really, there was already a suspicion that even when it was only King of Sacrilege, nobody would be able to rip out my soul and condemn me, and now I'm comfortable saying that's going to be absolutely impossible. Who's to say that, if I get to the third level, that anyone's going to be able to do anything to me at all? I might already be immune to the threats of the gods, but if I'm not, so long as I keep getting stronger then I sure will be. Somehow, the idea of the rest of the gods not being able to stop you if they need to is also terrifying. Well, as we say in the Myriad Church, any god who is unhappy can go away. We don't say that. Stop trying to make that my church's slogan. You gotta admit, it's a catchy slogan. It's not even remotely. It's not even clever. You're just full of spite. I mean, yeah. And the other thing, Ben? Hellori asked, breaking up the back and forth since it didn't seem like it was going to end anytime soon. Perhaps we can balance out this current issue with what you'd already mentioned about your enslavement? Ah, that. Well, it looks like thanks to how I use Eldritch Mind with Deep Connection, I can now level most Tier 1 active skills, at least as far as the ones I was able to test on. Elaborate on that. I'm just now able to transmit a deeper level of knowledge and understanding, he explained. I've connected to a huge number of people who hold high levels of both first-tier and awakened skills, and I can now sort of adapt the feelings of using them to a target, along with the knowledge I was already sending over. I've only been able to run a couple experiments for it on both Thera and Delaire, but it works pretty darn well so long as the information I send is then practiced. Though I know for sure I can't help with skills I haven't seen any examples of, and it seems like I might not be able to awaken people that way either, though I was only able to make one attempt on that, so it might just be lower odds without getting more people to test on. There's probably some other limits too, but for now, well, it's looking pretty handy, even if I don't want the gods trying to make me meet every person living on the planet and filling their heads. Again, Hellori wasn't quick to answer, just taking in what he'd said before shaking her head. Is it working on you too? I leveled my dance while practicing with Thera, and while I'm confident it will work on a few of my other more common options, I actually have very few active skills that are either first tier or that I'm not the first to get. Bizarre to hear, but true, I suppose. Anything else we should know then before discussing what to do about it? It looks like I can help people learn active skills now too. It took Delaire only about an hour each to learn Destruction and Material User from me. That's a faster teaching rate than Zandale. Yeah, but it's only for active skills, and I couldn't teach her Connect either, which means there's going to be some exceptions to what I can do in that category too. Do you genuinely believe that matters? No. I just know that he's being worked like a dog, and I don't want to go through that myself. You already do that to yourself. It's just on your own terms, Hellori told him, shaking her head before focusing more deeply on the mortal before her. So then, have you used it to gain any new skills yourself? Ugh. I want to so bad, but I'm telling myself to not split my focus. Ben sighed, already hating that choice. I need to think about how to kill the most powerful god in the galaxy and maybe even in the universe as a whole. I need to keep working on my various projects like refining down the summoning spell to something significantly less mana and faith intense, and most important of all, I need to raise Connect. Even with all of the bonuses on me, I can't waste my time gaining skills that I probably won't even get past the first tier before the third wave. If we win and I live, then I'm gonna go crazy with it, and if I can awaken my connect in a soon enough time frame, well, maybe I'll treat myself and learn a few new skills just as a little reward to myself. Okay, and I understand what you're saying. That just feels like a surprising amount of restraint. There's nothing you're going to try and get for yourself. Since he'd discovered he could. He'd been doing his best to not so much as think about it for the temptation it would give him, but the continued questioning broke his resolve. One active skill he'd wanted more than anything else making its way through as he discreetly woke his body up to start practicing in bed. Even if he kept straight-faced in the realm above. Well, maybe there's one I'll try, but let's not worry too much about that, and instead discuss how I'm going to be doing this once word gets out and the gods inevitably want to work me to death for it. I'm thinking this. In a few weeks, I'm going to be modifying souls the world over. Everyone who comes to get their souls modified can in turn benefit from the knowledge I can give, and anyone who doesn't is out of luck. Seems reasonable, Hellori nodded. I can see others thinking you should do more, but making it one big event will help streamline things a bit, and anyone already motivated enough to get some free power is going to be the sort who deserves the benefits while at the same time hopefully motivating others who might not have originally come to join, leaving only one question. How are you looking to get paid? God, I hate this. What I'm giving is worth so much, but any fair payment is going to be a huge fight. How possible does a second-tier awakening sound for my work? Upgrading my soul resilience to a new tier would leave me with a ton of new options. I think we both know the answer to that, Ben. Ugh. I hate every one of you cheap asses so freaking much. The help I'm going to give might mean thousands to hundreds of thousands of levels for people depending on how many come, and I know you guys aren't going to be shy about pushing your believers into going. The world's already been informed of the date for anyone who wants to get their attributes enhanced, Myriad said from the side. It gives people a chance to travel for it if they need to. See? Jesus. The moment this planet is safe, I'm not doing anything for anyone ever again. God. I don't even know what I want because for all of the most worthwhile things I keep being told no. With my last few financial agreements, I've already gone from having generational wealth to eternal wealth unless you're expecting anyone else to be able to make gate factories like me, and as nice as new attributes always are, I'm already so golden. God. So I can see you're a touch unhappy, Hellori said as diplomatically as she could while she let Ben fume, waiting for him to collect himself before he put up a hand. I'm fine, it's fine. It's all whatever. Okay, if you guys are going to negotiate for me, then I want my mana regeneration grown by at least 400 points. Modifying souls already got me 500 in general, but then someone made the stupid choice to put 300 of those points in my agility, so here I am, wanting complete say in where they're going, and I want payment as soon as possible. Is that bit really necessary? Hellori asked him. You've already been paid early for soul modifying, and that still needs to be done. It is necessary because here I am, trying to get to the third tier again, and no matter how unlikely the rest of you view the idea of me pulling it off in a few weeks, I refuse to miss out on those benefits if I can in fact make it happen, and then in turn having less to give every jerk on this planet who's getting their soul modified than I would have been able to if everyone up here hadn't wanted to wait. God. I don't care about how much some of them up here hate me. More power for me means more power for everyone else. You seem stressed. Yeah, I am, Ben deflated before pinching his brow. You think the stress is only going one way? Sure, the gods are unhappy anytime a mortal dares to suggest they be paid for their work, but I'm unhappy to work with a group that thinks they should be above payment. I meant what I said. When this war is done, however it turns out, I'm taking no requests from the divine ever again, bearing you, Myriad, and Nair, I suppose. And I guess Analia too, maybe Jagal, and I'll at least hear fixed out. But that's it. That's a pretty long list, Myriad called from the side, getting a dirty look for it. Well, don't make me trim it by one geometric shape. Ugh, yeah, I'll consider helping anyone up here who's seen fit to treat me fairly, and will pay me a fairly negotiated wage for my work, but I'm not doing anything for the collective gods of this world ever again. It's a community filled with assholes, and it's way too much stress. Well, some of that group should be arriving soon to let you practice connecting to them, so maybe control a bit of that hate, Myriad told him. It's not like there aren't a few more gods on your side than the ones you spend time with. Yeah, I know, it's just the ones who don't like me souring the batch. I'll deal. It was only a few more months of work dealing with the gods of the world and how they'd see fit to try and make him work while fighting tooth and nail to give him nothing in return. In the end, whether the world was saved or not, or if he lived or died, he would be free of having to ever again entertain the sort of negotiating that felt like some of the most unpleasant parts of his last few years of life.